Directing traffic, gonna go deep, has a man deep, it is caught for the touchdown, Corey Davis!
What does he do? Attacks leverage. If he's outside leverage, he doesn't want you to beat him outside. So stem towards him, hold him outside, stamp outside. Drive face, full cell vertical, get into the blind spot, and he absolutely burns him. Corner is lost. He literally has no idea where Wilson is.
Really high floor, really high ceiling. You could be talking about the best corner in the league. Sauce can do that.
This is actual film. This is actual football talk. It's a football show. We're supposed to talk football, not storylines.
And you are listening / watching another edition of Blewett's Blitz. Kyle, my friend, it's been 2 weeks now since you're doing every other week. I've missed you. What's going
on? Just trying to chill, Joe. I'm trying to enjoy the off season. Right. It's a little sad. It could be a little depressing when, I saw somebody post a meme. It said like, it was like SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward. And it was like Squidward behind, like he's in his house and he's looking at Patrick and SpongeBob be all happy. And it's like me, the Jets fan, who have been rebuilding for the last 13 years. And that's like Squidward. And then like SpongeBob and Patrick, who are like really happy. It's like my whole family who's Eagles fans who are in the Super Bowl again. And it's like, yeah, I mean, like, we were thinking like the Eagles were kind of like, okay, they went from winning a Super Bowl to being kind of like a shit show, firing their Super Bowl winning head coach. And now they're back in it. It's like, we just keep rebuilding. That's a little depressing, but other than that, trying to enjoy the off season.
Yeah, it's and with this game too, I don't know if I was necessarily rooting for the Bengals because my grandpa is a big Chiefs fan, but in general,
why did you never tell me that before?
Yeah, my grandpa, he's a big Chiefs fan, my grandpa, but nonetheless, he is he's already enjoyed obviously the last couple of successful years of the Chiefs. I don't feel so bad if they lose, but the Super Bowl is Eagles, who I don't want to win. I don't like their fan base, and obviously they're pretty close to us, just obviously proximity wise. So you get to run into a couple of Eagles fans, some who were not necessarily Eagles fans a couple of years ago, but nonetheless, don't want them to win. But with the Chiefs, like I'm fine with rooting for Mahomes. I'm fine with rooting for Andy Reid. But I freaking hate Jackson Mahomes and his wife. Like they just annoy the shit out of me every single time I see them. And I don't know if you saw like the recent thing. I don't know who they played in the first round. Whoever they played in the first round.
The Chiefs had to bye.
Okay. So whoever they played the second round. The second round was the
Jaguars.
The Jaguars. And like you saw them at the game, they're jumping up and down, and Jackson Mahomes is screaming like a 5-year-old child. Like it just I cannot root for them really. But I can't really root for the Eagles. So I don't really know. I guess I'm rooting for the Chiefs because of your dad and my grandpa. But I would like to see, the Mahomes family be a little bit upset because Jackson and his wife just seem like the worst type of people. So,
yeah, I mean, especially Jackson more so than the wife. But yeah, his. I mean, I don't have TikTok, but I guess people repost them to Twitter or whatever, and those videos are so cringe, man. Mm-hmm. On the one hand, like let everyone do their thing, let them live their life or whatever. But I don't know, it's just. You don't have to necessarily like the way that someone lives their life. I'm just saying, like, it's just like, I don't know. It's to me, I would feel so embarrassed doing like dancing like that or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, no, not on video, but it's the off season is never relaxing. Every single day, checking the Twitter and all that stuff about rumors and who's coming to the Jets. I'm hoping that a move is done. I think at this point last year or near this time last year, you had the Stafford trade. So I'm hoping something happens relatively soon. But we'll see. Also, skiing this weekend. I went skiing, which was fun.
Nice.
I can Pennsylvania. I can ski and snowboard, but when I skied, I used like the snow blades, like the little ones. They're probably about, I don't know, maybe 2 feet instead of 6. But unfortunately, apparently they don't sell snow blades anymore because of liability reasons. They don't pop off. So that was not fun. I had to use big skis, which I was not a fan of. Recorded, or I'm just wrapped up with my Q Sauce and Garrett Wilson reviews, so those will be coming out. We just got over 8,000 subscribers, which let's push to 10. 8 is nice, but 10 is obviously the obvious number we want to reach on YouTube, and then from there 15, 20, and hopefully up from there. Green light in the background, upgrading a little bit. The mic apparently isn't as great as the other one, but maybe I'll switch back. And other than that, Kyle, I'm 30 on Saturday, which is an interesting number to turn, but I've kind of accepted it. I feel like I'm a lot more ready for 30 at 29 than I was ready for 30 at 25. So to be an interesting weekend. Might pound some brews, but a lot of stuff going on. So, but with all that said,
one thing I can definitely say about your 30s is you're going to notice injuries more. I know you had that rotator cuff injury a couple of years ago from
labrum,
labrum. Excuse me, from working out. But one thing, like, I noticed in my 30s versus 20s is like when you do get injured from like lifting weights or whatever, those injuries linger a lot longer than they did in your 20s. But I think generally most people who you talk to, they say your 30s are better than your 20s. Your 20s, especially nowadays, you're kind of still figuring things out. So, it's not the end of the world that you're 30 now. You're married, you're in place and stuff.
Yeah. No, it's I would say like 25, 26 is when I started to recognize like, okay, McDonald's hit me harder or hangovers hit me harder. Like you start to notice it. And then obviously with the coming years, it hits you a little bit harder. So it'll be interesting, but we have a lot to talk about. Obviously, Kyle, we'll talk about the Nathaniel Hackett hire, our thoughts on that, talk about some other QB options, talk about Carr a little bit. We have a lot to discuss. And with offenses and just in terms of watching them, it's always a little bit difficult for me. I feel like the easier way to really understand an offense is to look at the numbers in terms of their, personnel, 11, 12, 22, 2, whatever it's going to be. It's really easy to have that in front of you. For me, I don't necessarily chart. I try to write some stuff down. So we'll talk about some Hackett notes, some things I noticed about the offense that might be a little bit different from LaFleur's offense, the running back usage for him, what went wrong in Denver. I only watched the first 2.5 games at this point. But obviously he didn't have a great start to the season. Nonetheless, I plan on watching the rest and see if those trends kind of continue throughout the season. I plan on watching the Bortles 2017 year. I plan on watching him with Rodgers if Rodgers is to be here. So I plan on watching 2 or 3. I don't know if I'm going to do a full-blown review of it because they're a little bit weird for me to do the offensive reviews because I don't know. I don't really have a great feel for how to do an exact review on them. But nonetheless, have you watched any of Hackett? Do you know anything of Hackett? How do you feel about that hiring in general? And then we'll get into the chat a little bit.
So good question. So I was actually mentioning on our last stream that he's an offensive coordinator. I forget in what state, but he coaches high school ball. His name's Bobby Peters, and he pretty much writes at least one book every year. Where he'll do like the complete, as he calls it, offensive manual of a particular NFL team. Yeah. He did the 2018 Rams. He did the 2018 Chiefs. Those were 2 very historically good offenses. He did the 2019 49ers. He did the 2020 Packers. I think he might have done the 2021 Raiders. And I'm pretty sure he's pushing out a book now about the 2022 Dolphins offense. So I did read his book about the 2020 Packers offense. I read a couple of his other ones as well.
Yeah.
I actually take that back. The 2018 Rams and Chiefs books were actually not his. They were someone who he swims in familiar circles with, named Taylor Colsty. So I did watch, I guess like, cause in his books, not only does he, chart numbers and stuff, and he points to specific plays where you can see certain formations and why this play didn't work and why this one did. I mean, if you want to get a feel for how good that offense was, and it was a really good offense. I mean, Rodgers had 8.5 yards per attempt or something like that. And he had 48 touchdowns, and, they were picked to go to the Super Bowl, won 13 games that year. I would say if you're interested and want to kind of get a feel, read that book. And then if you have access to the all 22 film, you can go and watch the clips that he speaks of. So I did. And then I read that back when it came out in 2021. And then, which obviously the reason why I read it was Hackett was the offensive coordinator, and Rodgers was the quarterback. And now there's a lot of rumors here. And then last night I was kind of reviewing, some of the things I highlighted in the book and stuff. So that's kind of all what I've done to kind of refamiliarize myself with Hackett, other than listen to a couple podcasts and whatever.
Yeah. So I have some notes on him, and we'll say hello to some people in the chat in a minute. My notes are not formulated at all, so you have to excuse me in terms of me going over some concepts and stuff like that. But in terms of the hire, just in general, there wasn't a ton out there that we were impressed with. A lot of the guys, whether it be a QB coach from the Colts or a QB coach from the Eagles or Patriots tight ends coach or this guy or that guy, a lot of the guys didn't have experience, and I thought the Jets going for a guy without experience after obviously LaFleur not necessarily working out was not the best idea. So there's only a few with experience who were really kind of like good hires to me. Obviously, Frank Reich got hired as the Panthers head coach now. You had Greg Olson interviewed with. Did Greg Olson get hired with the Chargers?
I didn't see him get hired.
Else?
No, Kellen Moore is the now.
Kellen Moore got hired. So yeah, okay, I would have liked Greg Olson maybe a little bit more than Hackett, but I'm not sure if Saleh has had any. He doesn't swim in the same circles as Kyle said with a guy like Greg Olson, so he knows Hackett. Obviously, he was fired with the Broncos this season after going 4-11, so he got fired, towards the end of the season. He's a Packers OC from 2019 to 2021. Won 13 games in each of the seasons with the Packers. Rodgers was the MVP in 2021, 2022, or 2021 and 2020. Was with Saleh with the Jaguars in 2015, 2016. He was a QB coach while Saleh was a linebackers coach in 2017. Hackett was elevated to the OC for the Jaguars. The Jaguars had 26.1 points per game, which is 5th in the league. They went to the AFC Championship game, so obviously a good year as a coordinator there, but then went to 15.3 the year after. If you look at the receivers on the team in 2018, and I want to do it for 2017 or 2017 as well. I don't know why I'm saying 2017, but 2017 as well. His receivers were like Keelan Cole, and I forget who the other one was. So it's like, okay, you kind of understand the offense being really bad, and obviously people figured out Bortles a little bit, but Bortles was very good the year prior. And then last year at the Broncos, 16.9 points per game, which was 32nd in the NFL. Obviously not very good. Didn't adjust well to Wilson, as some would say. And in my opinion, they didn't roll him out as much as they necessarily should have. He didn't roll out as much as he did with the Seahawks, at least when I watch the Seahawks on broadcast. But he didn't fit the offense very well, as he likes to get out of the pocket, makes plays on the move. He was never necessarily a quick rhythm passer for West Coast offenses. But with that all being said, you're hoping the Jets bring in a quarterback who fits the system, whether that be Carr or Rodgers. Both fit the West Coast system. They both played the West Coast system before, and now he doesn't have to manage the clock. And that obviously puts a burden on you with having to manage the whole team, the offense, the defense. So hopefully if you can hone a little bit more on the offensive coordinator role, it'll be better for him. And obviously last year with the Broncos, Kyle, it's not an easy situation. You have a quarterback who's being brought in for a ton of picks, a quarterback who doesn't necessarily fit the system, a quarterback who people have to go through his agent to talk to talk to said quarterback. You have a quarterback who's doing stretches on the team plane. You have a quarterback who's comparing himself to Wolverine because of how he heals from injuries. So the players in the locker room didn't like him just because of his personality. And then you factor on top of, okay, we traded for this guy. He cost us a shit ton of capital, a massive contract. He's kind of a douche. We're not winning games. Doesn't fit the offense. So it was a shit sandwich for Hackett with the Broncos last year. But I'm not going to say it was just all Hackett.
Yeah, I think this is kind of like something I've been thinking about a lot lately. Like, how much of it is like coaching? Like, someone who I respect a lot, and I've mentioned before in the podcast, is his name's Chris Vassar, and he has a podcast called Make Defense Great Again, and he has his own YouTube channel and stuff. And he's much more of a college football guy, and he even coached in college football. But he actually, I think he was like a GA at the University of Miami for a bit, and then did coach some high school ball. But, one of the things he says is like the NFL is kind of like really vanilla, and like, there's not a lot of, ton of innovation and stuff. And it's just like, a lot of coaches want it that way, and they just kind of rely on talent. And it's like really the most talented teams are really the ones who win. It's not so much of, this innovative, brilliant mind. That's why I saw somebody in the chat say earlier, that the Eagles hired the right coach with Sirianni. And it's like, I don't know. I mean, like, I feel like would he be such a great coach if they didn't have an absolutely stacked roster from top to bottom? I'm not so sure about
he wasn't
that.
a sexy hire at the time. Like it worked out well, but nobody was like drooling over Sirianni at the time he was hired.
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like with the NFL where everyone is so talented, so much more of the success of a team is based on talent than it is scheme and coaching. I'm not saying that stuff isn't important. It definitely is, but I think talent is number one. Like, I'm saying if Robert Saleh had consistent quarterback play and the roster that the Eagles have this year, I'm not saying they'd be in the Super Bowl right now, but they definitely would have been a playoff team or whatever.
No, you have an average quarterback, even slightly below average quarterback. We've said before, it's almost sickening at this point how much we've said it, but you win 10, 11 games this year. You're just an average quarterback. And I like with coaching, to me, there's an elite class of coaches, where they talk about like Shanahan's of the world or McVay's of the world. And then there are very, very bad coaches, let's say Adam Gase. But then there's a very large group in the middle where it doesn't matter as much. And it really matters about, your the Jimmies and Joes, as people say. Now, there's obviously some things that a coach may not do well. LaFleur was in that middle to me. And I want to get to a comment from Rich DeBow, if I'm saying his name right, from last week, that I'll ask you about LaFleur. But he was kind of in that middle tier, maybe a little bit, below average. Obviously, we only score at 8 touchdowns in 8 weeks, and you don't score a touchdown in your last 3 weeks, and you're putting up field goals. It's not good for your job, regardless of who you have running out there. So there are some tendencies, third down, red zone. How do they use their running backs? What's some wrinkles? I would say, just based on what I've seen from Hackett and what I've seen or what I've heard from, I have to get into it more. Hopefully, it's a clinic online or something like that. But what's the offensive line coach? We'll get them in a little bit. But Keith Carter. I would definitely be investing in the Jets running backs. That's something I could say. But
wait, there is a clinic online of Keith Carter?
I want to see if there is. I don't think
okay.
I looked it up. I didn't find anything, but obviously you have to go through the weeds a little bit with that stuff. But West Coast offense, short passes, big on yak, play action passings. There, it's not as heavy as I thought it would be, based on what some people said about Hackett. But then again, I'm only 2 games through. But you have some play action passing, which is good for Carr and Rodgers. There's more vertical shots than I thought there would be. Just in terms of a West Coast offense, there's a decent amount of vertical routes. Run first offense. Apparently, I haven't seen that necessarily. Again, I'm not charting, but I haven't seen a guy who just wants to run the ball. But apparently, with Keith Carter coming in, that could be a thing. And people have talked about Hackett's tendencies in terms of being run first guy. Maybe that will bear itself out over the next, whatever games I'm watching. 12, 13 games. I really like the way he sets up screens. He has a couple of wrinkles with screens that I'll talk about in the future and maybe break it down a little bit. But he likes to pull guys from the screen, from the play side. Let's say it's going to the right, the center, the right guard, the right tackle on screens instead of pulling from the backside. And the screens are a lot more quick developing. There's not a pump fake or deep drop back with his screens. It's a lot quicker, where the running back pretty much darts through the line of scrimmage, through the offensive lineman, and gets right out into the routes. There's not really a lot of sacks with his screens. So I like how quickly they develop.
By the way, if we're talking about quickness on screens too, you watched those 3 years where Hackett was the coordinator in Green Bay. I mean, there's so many times when Rodgers just pulls the ball and doesn't set his feet at all, but he's got a really quick release, and he can throw from like weird platforms and stuff, where he's immediately snapping it, and he's just like flicking it out there. He gets it out there so quick. Yeah. So the running backs are really, really quick into the screens. And in general, he's not a guy, at least from what I've seen, he's not a guy to keep his running backs in protection as often as Mike LaFleur was. He likes to combat blitzes. Instead of keeping that guy into block, he gets his running backs into routes very, very quickly. So if you have a good route runner as a running back, it's going to pay off dividends in this offense. Again, from what I've seen, I want to be transparent, say it's only 2 games so far. But watching that, running backs are going to be involved heavily. I've had a few problems with some of the spacing in the offense wasn't great in terms of flooding different zones against zone coverage. There were some times where receivers were running a little bit too close together. That could also be an execution thing versus a coaching thing. Obviously, we know that it's not just on the coach necessarily. It could be on the players a little bit. There were some times where he gets a little bit run heavy from second and long and third and long, but still, I didn't think it was so bad. Let's see what else I have in here. Most of Rodgers' best stats came under Hackett, so it's obviously good if he was to come here. And then I have some actual notes on the offense. Some of the heavier concepts: double outs, sail, vertical stretch concepts, post wheel spacing. He likes to run mesh a lot with 3 guys over the middle, whether it be like a mesh sit. We have the 2 guys running unders, and then the intermediate, whether it be a dig or a sit route over top. You read that as like a triangle with 2 vertical routes on the outside, really putting a lot of pressure on the linebackers. He likes that a lot. I saw some spin, hoss, pull. Trick plays are there, Kyle. I saw an end around that worked, but Judy had a terrible vision on the run. It was dreadful. So maybe not the best at yak, but it worked out pretty well. He had a sweep that worked. He had a flea flicker that worked, but Judy dropped the ball that was wide open. Obviously not ideal. He had a fullback sweep, which then turned into a pitch option with a receiver, which was a nice little wrinkle that I like to see.
The only thing I didn't like about it was that it was on 3rd and 1, and you're starting to work horizontally in a 3rd and 1 with a pitch option. You have a lot that needs to go right there instead of just running like a dive or, a Mike zone or something like that. So he had something on an end around. So plenty of trick plays that were interesting. Let's see what else I have in here. Anything you want to comment on that while I kind of go through my other notes? Again, I am not formulated this into a 0.1, 2, 3, 4. It's a very messy list of stuff I have about Hackett, but I'm formulating it now. And obviously, I want to share at least a little bit of what I've seen from his offense.
Well, obviously, you know a lot more about what he did in Denver than I did. If I can finish, I didn't kind of get to like fully make my point before when I was trying to say like, the reason why I was talking about talent versus coaching.
Mm-hmm.
I think that 4-11 is really bad, and it looked like he did lose the locker room and stuff. Everyone saw that one player blowing up on the sideline and stuff. So maybe he wasn't so good in the head coaching role for managing that type of stuff, because that is a lot of what the job of an NFL coach is. I think that's one of the reasons why a guy like Mike Tomlin's a good head coach. Might not be an X's and O's genius or whatever, but he's good at managing men. But I think the point I was trying to make is I think Russell Wilson's play really took a dip. Not only did Hackett what he wanted to do was not necessarily best suited for Russell Wilson's skill set, as you beautifully outlined before. But I think also it's Russell Wilson was missing some, throws that, he was making earlier in his career. And,
100%.
In terms of escapability, Russell Wilson has definitely lost a step or two. So
he ran himself right into a sack, like at least once or twice in the first 2 games.
Yeah, and he's always been a high sack guy. He's always ran into sacks, but he used to escape more sacks in previous years when he's not doing that as much at this point in his career. So I thought it was interesting when you were saying that the Broncos ran a lot of mesh. And according to the book that I read, and just from studying some of the film myself when I was watching it year and a half or so ago, the 2020 Packers, when they had Hackett and LaFleur and Rodgers. This is a quote directly from the book. The Packers are the best mesh team in the NFL. They run more variations than any other team I have studied. So it's interesting to see that he kind of, carried that over. I'd be interested when you go and watch some of the Jaguars, if you notice a lot of mesh pop up too. Yeah. So anyway, you can continue with whatever you want to say. I don't know if you want to go to the chat. We got two $20 super chats quite a while ago.
I'm gonna hit some stuff really quickly. There's some little wrinkles. I talk about some of the trick plays. There's a wrinkle that he likes to do where he has very short concepts, whether it be double slants or double outs or any type of short concept, even like a spot concept or a spacing concept, whatever it may be, where he has the quarterback read that short concept and then he has a screen attached to it. So if nothing's open on that, he has a screen. So it's like a 3-step drop. Okay, if nothing's open, hit a screen. So you don't really see coordinators do that too often. So that was nice to see. He's willing to go deep on 2nd and short, which is something that LaFleur didn't necessarily do all the time. But we like that, or at least I like when coordinators are willing to take some shots on 2nd and short. Then hopefully 3rd and short, you can, if you don't convert that 2nd down, you can convert that 3rd down. Again, he'll get his running backs quick into routes. He will split running backs out wide. So he will test our running backs in terms of their route running. If they are, then he will flex them out. So that's something also nice to see. Similar to LaFleur in terms of tightening the splits outside zone. So receiver blocking is going to be a premium again, whether that be containing or keeping Corey Davis or Lazard. I don't know how he is as a blocker. Also likes to isolate number 1 wide receiver. So hopefully you have Garrett Wilson isolated a decent amount. We'll use 2 running backs, which is something I didn't notice a ton of with LaFleur. There was maybe some of it, but there's definitely times where he had Gordon or whoever else it may be, and Jamal, or not Jamal Williams.
It could have just been what the person. I mean, if you remember, Javonte Williams was supposed to be the bell cow for them this year, and he went down really early in the year. So I think it was probably most of just what the personnel that he had. I mean, Latavius Murray. Latavius Murray's in his 30s now. Is that the guy you want? You want him playing a major portion of your snaps? I don't think so.
But at this point the first game he had I was watching the offense, so I'm like, okay, he's gonna be terrible, right? And I don't think he's great. I don't. I think he's more mid. I do. And obviously, I have to watch the rest of the season. But the first game, Judy drop, Tomlinson drop. There's another drop or 2 in there that I didn't write down. The pass protection was balls at times. He had 2 fumbles in that first game that were lost at the goal line. I don't know if you saw that, Kyle, against the Seahawks, but I think the score was they lost 17-16. They lost 2 fumbles on the goal line. That's not necessarily a coaching thing. He can't necessarily help that. So that obviously was not great for him. You had Russ skipping open wide receivers. You had him forcing balls to receivers with other guys open. And I didn't see the offense was overly predictable. So I don't think it was terrible. The Texans game, there were some things I didn't like, 2 back-to-back fades on the goal line, which I didn't necessarily love. But there was 2 drops / plays from Sutton where I think he could have made a play on the ball. I'm not seeing something terrible. I don't want to keep going through my notes because it's very, very again not organized right now. It's very much in the infancy of me getting really this offense down. But I didn't see something that was dreadful right now. And going through the rest of them, that's about it. Sack busts were there, drops were there, fumbles were there. So through 2 games, I'm not discouraged. I'm like, oh my God, this guy sucks. I think he's more in that mid category you're talking about. You have the top a couple of guys, Shanahan's, McVay's of the world. You have a couple of bottom guys, Adam Gase, Todd Bowles of the world, who are very bad coaches. And then I think that, again, Hackett's, there's in that mid section, which is a large chunk of the NFL where it really matters about, the Jimmies and Joes over the X's and O's. And yeah, it was tenuous with the Broncos, but he doesn't have to call play. He doesn't have to manage the players as much anymore. He doesn't have to call timeouts. He doesn't have to decide when to kick field goals. Because the end of that, I believe it was a Seahawks game where they completely flubbed up the clock. They had to kick a very long field goal where they could have got an extra play in there. But not discouraged is what I'll say. I know I rambled about a bunch of stupid shit that people don't even probably understand because there's no formulation to it at all. I'm just saying, in general, overall point is through 2 games right now, I'm not discouraged with Hackett's offense. And that's better than I expected it to be going into it.
Yeah, and I think it's also important for people to remember that, some guys are just not good head coaches, but they can be very fine coordinators, many such cases. And kind of sucks to see I'm not saying Fangio. I think Fangio, he never really got the quarterback thing settled there when he was there. He probably should have been given a little bit more time, truthfully. But Fangio, he's one of the best defensive coordinators to coach in the NFL in the past decade plus. And it sucks that the Dolphins got him now, but could you say that he was a great head coach? No, but I nobody who understands football, especially X's and O's, would say Vic Fangio is a bad defensive coordinator, at all. So, some guys are good coordinators.
A bad DC, but he's a terrible head coach.
And this year further cemented that, right? I mean, we experienced it for 5 years here. Was it 5 or 6 years here? Or was it 4? Was it 5 years?
4.
He was hired in 2015.
4. And then he got fired in 19.
There you go.
Yeah, okay. Because Gase was 19-20.
Yeah, right? So 4 disappointing years, especially when you consider that they didn't win in 2015. But yeah, some guys are good DCs or OCs, but not good head coaches. And you brought up the Shanahans and the McVays and LaFleurs, and they're kind of always linked to each other because they coach with each other, and they're these young guys who kind of rose through the coaching ranks together. I was curious if you noticed a lot of, because one thing that you noticed about Kyle Shanahan is he's very multiple with his personnel groupings, and on any given drive, a lot of teams, they'll rock with the same guys for one particular drive and, sub out here and there. But Shanahan, he's always very multiple with his personnel groupings and the way that he, but you didn't so much see that with the Packers. They were kind of okay, we're going to stick to what we're good with. What about Denver? Was it static personnel groupings, or did he switch it a lot?
I would say 11 heavy, but then there was definitely plenty of 12 and 21 as well. So I would say it's a mixture. I would say those were probably his top 3. So I'm going to go empty a couple of times. I would say 11 personnel heavy, but I think he's more than willing to use Uzama and Conklin on the field at the same time, or Carter or Knight and Breece Hall. So I don't think he's locked into just 11. And obviously to see with different personnel, in terms of the Jets, maybe he'll want to use more, 12 than he did with the Broncos, because listen, the tight ends from the Broncos were not great. Ogwegabom, whatever the hell his name is, and whoever else dropping balls, they weren't very good. Where you'd hope he'd get a little bit more production out of Conklin and Uzama. And another point of this hire too, and I don't necessarily love guys just hiring guys that they know, but with that being said, past that, I think it is something to note that they are staying in the same scheme in terms of the wide zone West Coast offense, where obviously there's more wrinkles. Again, there's different wrinkles. I'm hoping to see him run some. He runs a lot of motion pre-snap, I haven't seen a lot of like fake like orbit motions, jet motions, and all that stuff. I'm curious to see if I'm going to see that in further games. But if he does that, is he going to build off of it? Where LaFleur would run those jet motions, those orbit motions, and nothing was ever built into it, so it was never a threat for the defense. I'm curious to see if Hackett does that. He actually builds something off of that, screen, reverse, whatever it may be. That was one of LaFleur's flaws, where you look at him versus McVay. McVay would build off of that stuff and make defenses bite up, and then hit a post shot 45 yards behind the defense because they're biting up on the orbit motion. So that was something where LaFleur struggled. But I think it is important and something to note that they are staying in the same system, because you have all these young guys in the team, from Elijah Moore to Garrett Wilson to whoever it may be, Breece Hall, Michael Carter, and they don't have to learn a completely new system. They're not going to like a gap heavy, power heavy, type running scheme, or an Air Coryell system or something like that. So I do think it's important that they're staying in the same type of system. Now, some of the terminology will be a little bit different, and exactly what he wants will be a little bit different. And again, there will be some different wrinkles, but that is important for both the offensive players and the quarterback coming in. Whether that be, I think right now we'd say that the best shots for the Jets right now are Carr or Rodgers, which is something we'll talk about in a little bit, Kyle. But they both have run that similar system, and they're both good in that system in general. So to have the familiarity with obviously the offensive players and with the quarterback in the future is something that's important for the Jets to kind of start the season off in stride, instead of having that 5-6 week buffer period, or even a whole season buffer period. We don't really know the offense. You're not comfortable in it. So that's something that's important.
Yeah. Why don't we get to some super chats, because we just got another one.
Go to the chat.
Okay.
Yep, go ahead.
Mike, long time listener, follower of the show. Appreciate that. Mike gives $20 and says, "Happy birthday, Joe."
It's not today. It is Saturday. And I don't really even care about it. I'm not the person to care about a date on the schedule, but it is 30. So it's like, oh shit. But I appreciate you, Mike, who said he's able to catch us live for the first time in a little bit. So miss having you in here, Mike. But we'll run through the super chats, Kyle, and then we'll go to the chat and just hit them kind of in order.
Okay, cool. Jan also says happy birthday, and let's get to 10K. Appreciate that, Jan. Jan's always another one who always, drops some big ones. Yeah. Appreciate that.
Yeah. drop some big ones. Yeah. 10K is definitely the goal. Obviously 9 first, but 10 makes you feel pretty solid in the YouTube world. I'm gonna race right now with like my Twitter versus my YouTube, who's gonna get to 10K first. But I think it'll be my Twitter. But nonetheless, appreciate you, Jan. And then we have I think a $10 one from Marvin Guns. Nothing. Now, is there something that is under that he maybe forgot to put in there, or is it just $10 in general? I can't see that part.
Wait, here we go. Marvin Guns, can you explain wide outside zone run scheme?
Kyle, I want to hit that first.
I want you to go first, and I'll build off anything you say.
It's really well, it's kind of different with different coaches and exactly how they want it to be run, whether it be like straight line blocking or reach blocking. But in general, it's about the aiming point, where the running back's track is, and how the offensive lineman adjusts to said running point. Where if you're aiming for the C gap, you're going to have to probably try to reach that one tech on the play side. Where if it's an inside zone and your aiming point is that B gap or that A gap, if that defensive lineman, that D tackle, is going to push hard in that A gap play side, then you could force him to go where he's going, and then they can cut the run back. So it's really about aiming point and how they block to that set aiming point, and the running backs read to set aiming point. Where inside zone, okay, you're going to read the D tackle first. Let's just say, to be simple, with the outside zone scheme, you're going to run. You're going to obviously eye that defensive end soon in that gap, and then your reads run off of that first read. So it might go D end to D tackle, or D end. If there's no D tackle there, you might go to outside linebacker, or star on the overhang, whatever it may be. Inside zone, it might be D tackle to D end, or D tackle to backside D tackle. So it's really about aiming points.
Explain the reads that the running back goes through.
You're talking about for like bang, bounce, bend.
Yeah.
Typically, if everything works out well, you're going to bang the run, which is hitting the hole that's designed. Typically, wide zone, outside zone. Outside zone is a little bit different than wide zone. Outside zone, I typically refer to outside zone if it's like outside leg of the tackle, where wide zone's even wider than that. So wide zone actually is a little bit wider of a track than outside zone for me, and I go wide, outside, inside, tight. Belly in terms of zone schemes, but wide's a little bit more than outside. So some people lump them in together, but in general, it's outside. But yeah, if your design gap is the C gap, you bang which is I always just fucked up, and I'll say like you bang the hole there. People are like, oh, whatever, but you bang it. let's say that DN crashes inside and you read an outside that's open, you can bounce the run, which is hitting it a hole to the outside even more than you were aiming for. And then bending the run would be cutting the run back. I'm not saying you have to necessarily hit 1 gap, 2 gap, 3 gap. You can cut it back all the way back if guys are really playing aggressive to the play side. But yeah, it's about aiming point, and the aiming point works off of the running back and also the offensive lineman blocking for said aiming point. But then it depends on what type of offensive line coach you have, because there's offensive line coaches who you have to get to. The offensive linemen have to reach that 3 tech, they have to reach that 5 tech, whatever it may be. And then there's coaches like John Benton, who we had last year, who was more about like straight line blocking and taking a guy to where he's going. So there are wide zone systems that are
against him. Like, if he's going to play really heavy outside, when he's already working outside, if you just get a body in front of him and kind of further push him outside, you're going to make a clearer track for the running back.
So there's different types of outside zone schemes depending on who your offensive line coach is, which I'm curious to see how Keith Carter exactly is. But it's about the running back's track where they're aiming to, what their read is. I'm sure there's obviously more I could probably do on that, but that's pretty much it in generic stuff. Kyle, anything to add to that?
I'll keep it brief. I would say that for someone like that's kind of just really kind of starting to learn the ins and outs of like X's and O's, and I'm not at all assuming that that's the case with you, Marvin, or I'm just saying for anyone who's like listening right now, it's kind of always easier when you see football when you have like a visual. At least for me, I mean, a lot of people are visual learners, but with football, like it's one thing to talk about, it's another thing to actually kind of see what the players are doing. And the cool thing, the day and age that we live in, there's so much film and stuff available the average person could get that they couldn't get 10, 20, 30 years ago, whatever. There's a ton of like clinics. Alex Gibbs, offensive line coach, run game coordinator, I believe, for the, late 90s Broncos, 2-time Super Bowl winning champs, with Terrell Davis. He's kind of sometimes considered the father of like outside zone. And obviously, who was the head coach of the Broncos at the time, Mike Shanahan, father of Kyle Shanahan, who still runs a lot of that stuff. Anyway, they had tremendously good running games, right? You're talking like, Terrell Davis, what was he, an undrafted guy rushing for 2,000 yards or whatever. There's a lot of Alex Gibbs clinics on YouTube that you could watch. And the footage is a little bit older, so it might not be as high quality, but it's good enough that you can see it. And like, a lot of it's actually from his time when he was the offensive line coach, I believe, for the Atlanta Falcons when they had Michael Vick and Warwick Dunn. And you see some really good teach tape of like how outside zone should be run. And if I can kind of like, simplify, like, like zone blocking, it's kind of like, whereas like when you run like a gap play, like a power or something like that, the running back's aiming point is definitely this hole. That's where you're taking it. Zone is kind of like, okay, we're going to see what the front is. And, we might make adjustments pre-snap accordingly, but based on how they play it and because so much of football, football happens so quick, depending on how good your players block it, the running back has multiple reads to take it where the most ideal place is. I'm personally a big fan of like zone blocking. One thing that Joe has said a lot throughout the years when he does his reviews is he hates zone plays from the gun. And I think I tend to agree with him because and the reason I say that is one of the main things when you run outside zone is the running back needs to be able to see what's developing so he can pick the proper hole, because it's different than gap when he knows what hole he's running through. But when you run it from the gun, his vision kind of gets a little bit muddied, so it's a little bit more difficult for him to see what the hole is. And this is what
you're running sideways too, so it's so hard to hit said hole. If you see a hole backside, it's just almost impossible to get to it. I hate outside zone from gun, but
no, and I tend to agree. But and Adam Gase would run a ton of outside zone almost to a fault, and it kind of did start to click at the end of the 2020 season a little bit. But if you look at his first year with the Dolphins, which would be 2016. Jay Ajayi, the J train, and he barely ever ran it from the gun. It was straight it was straight, like, running back directly behind the quarterback deep. He had like a really long track. There's a lot of good tape on there as well. I mean, Ajayi had 1,400 yards that year, and he didn't even start the whole year. So, yeah, I would say, just Google some Alex Gibbs outside zone, and you'll find literally hours worth of clinics and stuff. Anyway.
Yeah. So we'll get into the chat a little bit too, and I'll get through some of the topics. People talking about Carr going to Vegas. Isn't one of the things? Again, I suck with contracts, and I just don't stay up with it. But isn't a big part of the thing with Vegas is they don't really have a lot of cash flow. And Rodgers immediately when he signs, is there like a $60 million like cash bonus or something like that? Like that has to come like right out of Woody's pocket or something, or their $60 million has to go in escrow or something like that. So if the Raiders are having cash flow problems and Rodgers stays in the contract he is, Vegas might not be able to afford Rodgers. Big Green says Rodgers bought a house in Vegas. Hope that isn't true. I don't know where you saw that, Big Green. I think you might be maybe you saw something in relation to Carr saying where is Rodgers moving to, and Adam said like by me or in my neighborhood or something like that. I don't think he actually bought a house in Vegas. I know
I don't understand why he would buy a house before anything is even official yet. And by the way, like he goes on McAfee's show like all the time because apparently he's like really good friends with AJ Hawk or whatever. But he recently said, I saw it clipped on Twitter that like he said that if they are having conversations, nobody's told me about it. I haven't been a part of those conversations. So now he could be lying. I mean, players and coaches lie all the time. But I mean, like to me, it kind of seems like he's still undecided. Even if he wants to play, I think he is going to play for at least a little bit more.
It seems like,
but I don't think like he kind of really knows what his future is yet. So I don't know. The idea that he bought a house in Vegas and that already, that he's going to Vegas when like nothing's been in it, that just kind of seems kind of silly. They haven't even gotten rid of Carr yet.
Dude, and he's making like $40 million a year. He could buy a house in half the states in the country if he wants to. Like it's not a big deal. Just because he has a house in Tennessee doesn't mean he's playing in Tennessee. He just might like the area, So I was thinking about it. I was like, if he does move to New York or if he does play for New York, like, do you buy a house here for a year? Do you just rent a really good, not Airbnb necessarily, but I'm curious to see how that would work. But what's up, Fire Sports? What's up, Rob? I know we're back in the chat a little bit. What's up, Mike? Hitting the right.
By the way, Swolsey said they are having conversations without me, so I guess I misquoted him a little bit. Yeah, I think you're right. I remember him saying that now. But the point is, if they're having the conversations without him, that means he doesn't know, right? And if he doesn't know, why the hell would he? Oh, let me go preemptively buy a house in Vegas because I know that's where I'm going to end up.
Yeah, I don't think he bought a house in Vegas, nonetheless. But it almost seems like the Packers and Rodgers, like Rodgers wants to not necessarily force the Packers' hand because he wants to be the good guy and be remembered well, and the Packers don't necessarily want to shit on Rodgers because then they'll be shit on from the fans. But interesting. Cat Trotta said he can't root for the Chiefs or the Eagles. I would say Chiefs over Eagles, but I just hate Jackson Mahomes. I do. Meatball Parm. Good evening, Joe. Don't forget.
It's hard to hate a team because of somebody's brother.
I just don't want him to be happy. And correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if I'm right. But apparently there was something with like a restaurant where they called him out where he just walked in with like 20 of his friends or something like that and like demanded a table. And the restaurant was like, bro, like we can't, like we're full. We can't just give you a table if you show up unannounced with 20 people. And then he like kind of like called him out on social media. And then they put in the most like polite but shitting on him way possible, like, hey, don't be a stuck-up douchebag. It was awesome to say.
So
but then they apologized later.
Imagine you work in that restaurant. Like, what do you want me to like tell people who are already sitting down and eating to leave? Like, if you don't have any tables, you don't have any table. Like,
do you know who his brother is? I don't give a fuck. I want my flank steak. Good evening, Joe. Don't forget your wife can only plan vacations for June and July, no exceptions. I'm going away in May, so it's right after the draft. A couple weeks after the draft, I think like mid-May. I'm going away. But yeah, 30s are great. Hello, gents. Hello, Afram. Sneakers the boots. There was no must-sign coordinator candidate this year. Hackett fits what we were looking for prior. Yeah, and like, listen, if we were hiring Hackett to be the head coach, I would be freaking out a little bit because of how bad it went with the Broncos. We were talking about an offensive coordinator who, he had a bad year with the Jaguars in 2018. Kyle, I don't know if you can go and look up right now while I go through the chat a little bit, his 2018 roster with the Jaguars. But 2017 was a good year, obviously bringing him to the AFC Championship game. The years of the Packers were good. He has familiarity with Saleh. And at the end of the day, the young players on the team are going to be relatively used to the system. Again, they have to learn some new verbiage and things like that. But they've been in a West Coast system, so a lot of it's going to be the same idea, at least. They're not going to be swimming for the first season of it. Maybe the first couple of weeks they'll be swimming a little bit, but in general, yeah, it's fine. With me, I think he could be a decent OC. I'm not blown away with the hiring, but from what I've seen, what I've researched, I'm not like miserable about the hiring. I'll be much more disappointed with a hire like the Patriots tight ends coach, or who was the Eagles quarterbacks coach, Marcus Johnson, or whatever the hell his name was, no OC experience. I'd rather have Hackett than any one of these guys with no experience. Like, Hackett has proved that he at least could be a decent OC, if not a good OC, at least well enough to show that he could be a head coach. So you take him now and you lessen what's on his plate. Hopefully he can be good. Apparently he's a very personal guy. A lot of people like him. And then past that, Kyle, oh shit, there's something I was going to mention. I'll remember it in a little bit. But look at his offense, Kyle. Like, read off, what was his receivers' names in 2018?
Blake Bortles, Leonard Fournette, Tommy Bohannon, former Jet great. Keelan Cole, another former great Jet. Dante Moncrief, James O'Shaughnessy, Eric Flowers at left tackle. By the way, Eric Flowers at tackle was a disaster. As a guard, he kind of had a little bit of resurgence in his career. Andrew Norwell, Brandon Linder was an okay center. AJ Cann,
your starting receivers are Keelan Cole and Dante Moncrief. Like,
this is the bottom of the barrel roster for sure, offensively.
Yeah. And even 2017, what was the 2017 if you could look that up in there too? And he had a top 5 offense. But damn, I was gonna bring up a point about people talk about Hackett a little bit in the chat and saying that they don't think it's necessarily like, what are your feelings about Hackett in terms of the Jets trying to bring in Rodgers? Do you think it's a move for just Rodgers?
I don't.
Or how do you feel?
I think that would be asinine to say we're going to hire a coach and put all your eggs in that basket. I mean, because ultimately Rodgers could say, I'm retiring. I don't want to go to the Jets. Fuck the Jets. I mean, like, not saying he would do that, but I'm saying like he could. I think that would be stupid. I think a lot of it is just like, hey, listen, they looked at his track record. He's been an offensive coordinator in multiple stops. So you talk about getting someone with experience. He's had experience in multiple stops. And like, I mean, like, some great, some not, but like, hopefully he learned from it. And there's also the familiarity. Robert Saleh has worked with him before. So I think it's kind of mostly for those reasons. And he has had coaching experience too, albeit not great, but I mean, at least hopefully he learned something from that.
Now, with that being said too, and do you think there's something into this where they Hackett apparently, and I don't know exactly the money, but if he was sitting on the couch this year, he could have had a lot of money just coming in from the Broncos for whatever they owed him for being a head coach. But coming to the Jets, that offsets, so he's getting paid. He could have been being paid to do nothing and taking a year off and readjusted, but he came to the Jets for whatever the salary may be. Do you think there's something to that in terms of the Jets telling him their plan at quarterback?
I'm sorry, I didn't fully hear your question because I was looking through that 2017 Jaguars roster.
Because he could have, I think you're on right now, but he could have been being paid right now to sit on the couch and doing absolutely nothing by the Broncos.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Do you think he would come out of retirement or year off to stake his career really on being an OC? Because listen, if you fail at head coach, you come to the Jets and the offense sucks with the Jets, your track is going straight down to the ground. So do you think there's something to the Jets telling him, hey, we've had some contact with Rodgers. We've had some contact, maybe behind the scenes with Derek Carr. We feel really good about landing one of those guys. Could you coach one of those guys? And that's why he came out of retirement. Whereas coming to the Jets, with, hey, right now we have Zach Wilson or Jacoby Brissett or Andy Dalton or Jameis Winston, he might have been like, I'm going to sit on my couch and collect a check.
I don't know. That seems kind of dangerous to tell a guy who's currently not employed by you, hey, we've had contact with a player who's under contract with another team. Right, because like think about it, the Dolphins just got fined a first-round pick for tampering with Tom Brady for a couple of years.
At least the plan to get those guys. We're going to be very aggressive. We're not going to be outbid, Kyle. We are not going to be outbid for Derek Carr. We're not going to be outbid for Rodgers. So
yeah, I could see that as something to motivate him. I mean, like, hey, listen, if you were the coordinator for an all-time great quarterback and you had some historically good offenses, and I think in Hackett's mind, like, yeah, he's already made a ton of money, but everyone wants to make more, right? I mean, you want to provide for future generations of your family. I think in his mind, he probably wants another shot at a future head coaching gig. And in his mind, he's probably thinking, I got the short end of the stick, man. You only give me 1 year. I didn't even get a full year as a head coach. And I was in a less than ideal situation. So, I think that for him to get another shot at a head coaching job, he'd have to do great. Kind of like Dan Quinn, man. Like Dan Quinn, like he definitely had some good years in Atlanta for sure. They almost won the Super Bowl. Dan Quinn was like a highly prized head coaching candidate for the past couple of years because of, what he did with that Dallas defense as a coordinator. And I think Hackett, like, he might be thinking like, okay, well, I can get back to being a head coach, but I have to have some really good offenses. And in his mind, he might be thinking like, well, if Rodgers is my quarterback again, I could maybe make that happen again. I don't know. We're trying to get in someone's head right now.
What is up, Socrates? Follow the Eagles blueprint and draft on the quarterback. I think they might consider that if they weren't in a situation. Oh, which, by the way, did you bring the 2017? You didn't. I
did have it up. Yeah, I did have it
up.
Sorry. We didn't talk about it. I'll put it back.
Their number one receivers. No, it's like you're talking about a top 5 offense, and I believe their receivers were
Blake Bortles, Leonard Fournette, Tommy Bohannon, Allen Hurns, Marquise Lee, USC,
Mercedes Lewis at 33 years old.
Yeah,
a rookie left
Which,
tackle.
by the way, he's still a really good blocker.
Yeah. But you're seeing, okay, yeah, it fell off, but that's a really impressive year to be a top 5 offense with that talent,
By the way, is Mercedes Lewis a free agent this year? Anyone know?
I don't know.
I'm curious because think about it. Think about the connection there. Mercedes Lewis goes to Green Bay, where Hackett is in Green Bay. I'm just saying, like, it doesn't make sense because we just signed 2 tight ends last year.
Yeah, we signed 2 tight ends, and
my point is that coaches like to get players they have familiarity with.
Okay, Alan Lazard. Get me Alan. I'm okay with Alan Lazard over Davis type deal, but I don't need it. A 4th tight end. Like, if you're playing Mercedes Lewis over Ruckert next year, I'm gonna be a little bit frustrated. So, but yeah, I think if the Jets were more secure in their jobs, they draft another quarterback. But right now, you're not going to hitch your wagon to another rookie quarterback. There's no way they're going to do that. J Speed, do you think the Jets are more appealing than the Raiders to Rodgers? Kyle, what do you think in terms of Jets versus Raiders? In terms, let's say they both offer the same trade package and they want to be nice to Rodgers, and Rodgers choose where you want to
go. This is interesting. I would say that neither team has a good offensive line or even average offensive line at this point. So there's that to consider. I don't think Rodgers cares too much about having a good running back, which you could argue that both teams do with Jacobs and Breece Hall. Receivers, obviously Devontae Adams, he has such good chemistry with him, but I mean, did Rodgers care enough to like keep him around? I mean, like, Rodgers could have done the Brady thing and took like a drastic salary cut, which I'm not saying he should have done at all. Like, who the hell would do that? Very few people do that. But I mean, like, the Packers couldn't afford to keep both of those guys. They chose to stay with Rodgers and trade away Adams. So, like, does he care that much? I mean, like, he might say, oh, well, this Garrett Wilson, he's a young, great talent. I could really make something out of him. But would you prefer Devontae Adams or Garrett Wilson? I would have to think that Rodgers would choose Devontae Adams. So
I don't know if they're keeping Waller, though. I think if they got Rodgers, obviously they would keep Waller. I think the Raiders.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Now, obviously, McDaniels, the coaching. He's going to pick the Jets. I would say the offensive line, Jets slight nod over the Raiders. Running back, are they keeping Josh Jacobs? Are they keeping Waller? They're obviously a little bit older of a team, so the offense is, even if you want to give a slight nod to the Raiders, okay, I completely get that. But the defense is obviously completely different. We're talking about a top 5 defense versus the Raiders are at best a mid-level defense. So yeah, the offense might be slightly worse or about even. Again, if you want to be generous and say slightly worse to the Raiders side, the defense is not comparable. So you're talking about having to put up 17 points a game, 20 points a game with the Jets. So I would say the Jets is more because of the defense than the offense.
Yeah, and I'd have to assume it would be coaching too. I mean, everyone knows. I mean, we're not breaking any news here how much he loves Hackett and vice versa. So it would seem like, and listen, Saleh, I mean, he definitely has his faults for sure, and he's not an offensive coach, which, that might make Rodgers assume, okay, like, it's going to be me and good old Nate Hackett, designing the plays and designing the game plan and stuff. And Saleh's going to kind of be a little hands off with that. And I think he would probably like that versus McDaniels, who, I don't want to call him a control freak or anything like that, but he can be a tough guy to deal with. Carr, the good Christian man that he is, he didn't want to get in all the personal details with why he and the Raiders relationship fell through. But I have to imagine that Josh McDaniels was a huge reason why that was the case.
Now, do you have? I don't know if you saw the comments last week. I basically said that I don't care about him really doing ayahuasca, and that turned into a guy commenting and saying, "Oh well, you Rodgers and Deshaun Watson can all hang out in a room together, and that Aaron Rodgers should be doing charity and shaking kids' hands and making kids' life better for pretty much every single second he's off." And he again comparing Aaron Rodgers doing ayahuasca to a guy who got charged or at least accused by 23 girls for sexual assault is the same thing. Like people are fucking crazy. But do you have any problem with Rodgers doing ayahuasca? I don't love his personality. He's definitely a me guy. And he's a little bit odd sometimes. I don't like that he always is putting the Packers kind of in limbo in terms of his decisions in the offseason. But he has to decide soon. Because listen, and this is a conversation we'll get to a little bit more in depth. But what if Rodgers does decide to retire? All the Jets' chips are in that basket, chips are on the table for Rodgers. He retires. Carr goes to the Falcons or something, and we're sitting there like, oh fuck, So while I understand that Rodgers might be better for a year or two than Carr, Rodgers may be option A, but I almost rather go with option B over option A because there is no option C, D, E, F, G for me. So Carr is a safer thing to do in my opinion, but nonetheless. What are your feelings about Rodgers off the field? And then the secondary question about
you see this comment on the screen?
No, I'm behind the show.
Look at the comment I just put on the screen.
Dude, I don't care. Like I couldn't care any less. I really don't. As long as if he comes and balls out, as long as he's not getting charged for sexually harassing women, then I don't care. Like comparing Rodgers to Watson is absurd. I don't really care so much. That he might do that stuff, and he's a douchebag brother, like he's winning his games. I really couldn't care any less. And then another thing I want to hit on too, Kyle. So I'm giving you kind of a lot on your plate here. But the whole thing with Rodgers for Wilson, I want you to comment on that as well, and I'll get into that a little bit. My thoughts on that.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we'll get into that in a bit. that's funny.
Yeah.
So I personally, I don't know a lot about ayahuasca. I mean, I've studied a lot of, being a history teacher, I've studied a lot of not so much the chemistry of drugs, but like the whole, war on drugs and how that's affected, geopolitics and things like that. And, I think that cracking down on people and trying to police people's morality and things like that has had a lot of drawbacks. And you and I have kind of talked about that a lot of personally and stuff as well. And I mean, I don't really know a lot about what ayahuasca does to one's brain or body or anything like that. So I can't really comment, but I mean, like in terms of his play on the field, it doesn't really seem to be affecting him. He's had MVP seasons in recent years in his late 30s. I don't care what the stats are last year. He was not in the best situation in the world last year. The games I watched of him,
was he play with a broken thumb from like week 4 on too or something like that?
Yeah, and like, dude, even that game that you went to, man, like he threw some really nice passes in that game.
Oh, he had like 3 or 4 balls that were ridiculous in that game.
This guy is one of the best throwers of the football that we've ever seen play the game. I mean, if we're talking straight talent, he's way more talented than Tom Brady. Right. Like if we're talking straight talent, he's more talented than Peyton Manning. You could argue that, maybe they're better leaders. They're more intelligent players than him. I wouldn't argue that. But I'm talking like if you want, and this is a guy who, mind you, he was a later first round pick for a reason. There's Doug Maddox is a good follow on Twitter. He's a high school coach who writes some really good books and things like that. And he has this whole system. And really, if you want to see the evolution of football, it always starts at the lower levels. It watch high school ball, and then colleges start adapting to some things the high schools do, and then eventually, the NFL picks it up. And there's this good article where Andy Reid kind of like talks about like how the NFL is always like 5 to 10 years behind college football, and college football is always 5 to 10 years behind. And I could be messing up the numbers a little bit there, and then high school ball, but anyway, Doug Maddox, he did a good thing with Ted Wynn a couple of years ago about Aaron Rodgers' mechanics and throwing motion. And Aaron Rodgers had a lot longer release when he, was coming out of college in his, his early years. And he worked a lot to get that release a lot quicker. And it's one of the quickest in the NFL nowadays. He used to hold the ball really high too, like which was kind of common for quarterbacks back then. And now he's got to kind of, lower. And I did see that Rivka said something in the chat about how Zach's and Rodgers' mechanics are a little bit similar. I would say that the way that they hold the ball, where they hold it's a little similar, and maybe some of the throwing motion similar, but the footwork is not similar at all. like Rodgers has really clean footwork, and like he almost drops back in like a very rhythmic pattern where Zach's feet kind of look very clunky at times. But in terms of Rodgers' personality and stuff, I mean, like some people were kind of bitching on Twitter about like, oh well, the what's the name of that 4th round receiver, Romeo Doubs. Romeo Doubs said, oh I never hung out with 12 off the field, and then I saw like who was it? Some veteran offensive lineman said like, yeah, and I was not hanging when I was in my mid to late 30s. I wasn't hanging out with my young teammates either outside of practice. I got a family. Like now, Rodgers, I don't believe that he has a family. I don't think he has any kids. I don't know if he's in a relationship at this point in time. I know he's been in relationships. You know, I try like we shouldn't really judge people's personal lives. Do I find it a little strange that apparently he doesn't talk to his father and doesn't talk to his brother or whatever? I mean, that is a little weird, and it makes you wonder what kind of a person he is. But at the same time, sometimes family members do some fucked up things to other family members. Maybe he wasn't the wrong one in that relationship. Maybe some people did something to him. You don't know. So I mean, like, we're here talking about football, and the point is that Aaron Rodgers has won a hell of a lot of football games in his career. He's one of the most talented quarterbacks to ever play the game in the world. I'm all for like, hey, listen, I'm very skeptical giving up a lot of draft capital to get a guy who's older, who
I don't think it's 2 first-round picks though.
Huh?
I don't think it's 2 first-round picks.
It probably won't be because of his age and how long he's going to play. Like, I don't want to trade a first-round pick and a second-round pick for a guy who's going to give me 2 years. That doesn't sound great to me. If you're telling me I got Rodgers for the next 3-4 years, okay.
Especially it's gonna be 2 max 3. I think it's max 3. I guess it's 2. To me, I said last week, I think we'd take a 3rd this year and a conditional 1st next year. Like you give him a 3rd this year. You know, if you make the playoffs next year, it's obviously has to play. But if he plays next year, and we make the playoffs, it's a 1. If he plays, it's a 2. If he just plays, it's a 2. But I'm okay with like a 3rd, like a 2 and a 2, a 3 and a conditional 1. But there's no way I'm giving up 13 and a 2 and a 3 for Rodgers when I can have Carr for a 4th round pick. He could be here for however many years. So in general, maybe 2-2, maybe 2 2s, maybe a 1 next year. You're hoping that pick is going to be 25th, 26th. Obviously, we really hope for it to be 32. I can live with
2 2s for sure.
But
I mean, we did get
2
far
first is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Joe, I mean, this is called Blewett Splits for a reason, and you are a co-owner of Jets X Factor. So I'm going to leave this up to you, but you did kind of ask me about Rodgers off the field and his personality and stuff. Do you want to weigh in on how he was treated regarding the whole vaccine thing at all? Because I can comment on that, but if you don't want to, if you want to, play it safe with that, we don't have to talk about that.
I don't care.
Like I know some like football, like it's you shouldn't really like it's not people aren't really tuning in to talk about politics or whatever, but sometimes it gets involved in talking about the game, and some people naturally have a skepticism of Rodgers for that, but I think he was treated very unfairly for what happened with that. And he did go on the McAfee show after the whole thing. I mean, first of all, they knew for a while that the vaccine was not stopping transmission. All right. He knew that. He said he had a personal condition, right? Like he was open to getting it, but he said that, he had studied it and the ingredients in it. And he said that his body had an adverse reaction to it. And that's why he decided not to get it. He had to get tested every morning. He couldn't even work out with his teammates. He had to work out. He had to wear a mask. And dude, do you think those things really do much to stop transmission or anything like that? I mean, and then he wasn't trying to lie to the media. He said I've done things to, enhance my own immunity. He didn't say I was vaccinated and then lie. He said, I've done things to, I forget the exact words he used, but he said something along the lines of that. Now you could say, oh, he's being deceptive or something like that. But he said, I was trying not to make it about me.
Immunized.
Yeah, I was immunized. I was immunized. I've gone through an immunization process, something like that. He wasn't trying, he didn't straight up lie. He said he was trying not to make this about himself, but you guys kept making it about him. And it's like, oh, well, someone might say, oh, well, he's got to, what about the health of his teammates and stuff? And it's like, okay, well, that's considering that he would be more likely to transmit the virus. But we know for a fact, and we even did know at that time that they're not really stopping transmission. So I don't know. I feel like he was treated. I mean, I saw some guy who gets MVP votes. There was some Jagoff beat reporter from the Bears saying something like, because of Aaron Rodgers, how he handled this whole vaccine thing, I will not be voting for him for MVP. And it's like, dude, because of that, like isn't this supposed to be football related? So he was treated very unfairly with that whole thing. I'm sorry, he was.
To be short, it's his choice. I don't give a fuck. It's your choice. It's you. So,
I mean, people want to say my body, my choice when it comes to other things, but anyway.
We can get into a very long conversation about this, Kyle, which we're not going to get into on this. But clearly, we figured quite a few things about that were a little bit of bullshit. But nonetheless, in terms of Aaron Rodgers for Zach Wilson, what are your thoughts on that?
Why would the Packers want Zach Wilson? I'm just being honest.
No. I'm talking about bringing in Aaron Rodgers, then you bring him in. Maybe he could fix Zach Wilson. Now, my only thing with this is, let's say if you're trading for Rodgers, you're going to assume he's going to play for 2 years, right? That's Zach Wilson's third and fourth year. You're not extending his 5th year option to him. So how does it translate? Unless you're going to keep him for that 4th year, and then if you see something from him, you're gonna re-sign him for a year or two. But at that point, would he even want to be back with the Jets in his 5th year? So people assume like, oh well, Wilson can just take over. Well, Wilson's not going to be here on his 5th year option. I don't know exactly how. I think it's quite a bit of money, and especially for what you've seen for Wilson right now. Like if we could sign a dotted line for Wilson being a solid backup in the NFL right now, I think people would honestly take that. Like obviously we want him to be a superstar, but he's not proven he could be Teddy Bridgewater, Jacoby Brissett, Jameis Winston, nothing like that. Very good backups. I think Jameis Winston's probably a lower end starter, but you know what I mean. So for people saying, "Oh well, he'll help Wilson, and Wilson will take over after that," well, how? You're not giving the 5th year option. So do you re-sign him after the 5th year?
Yeah, I think if any thought, maybe not any, but I think if even a decent part of your thought pattern is to bring in Aaron Rodgers to mentor Zach Wilson and help develop Zach Wilson, I think that is a awfully stupid plan.
Yeah.
I mean, I listen, I get you use the 2nd overall pick in the draft to draft Zach Wilson. And unfortunately, it just didn't work out for a variety of reasons. The idea that he's salvageable at this point is so slim. And the idea that you're going to that it's going to take a 30-something, a 39-year-old quarterback who's thinking about winning a Super Bowl and making money and cementing his legacy in the record books, the idea that he's going to want to spend a major amount of his time mentoring this young kid. I mean, like, listen, of course he'll do it. Everyone does. Joe Flacco was trying to do it. I mean, Joe Flacco's not Aaron Rodgers, but come on, that is a dumb idea. Oh, well, they have a similar play style and stuff. I have no doubt that Zach Wilson could learn some things from Aaron Rodgers and probably get a little bit better from sitting the bench and watching Aaron Rodgers. But the idea that, he's going to become Aaron Rodgers or anything close to that from watching him, I think that is a stupid idea. And like you said, like, let's say that, Rodgers plays for 2 years with the Jets. Because we saw Zach Wilson in practice every day. Now we're going to extend Zach Wilson and give him a contract or give him his 5th year option because we think he's going to be the future. Like that is
the thing. People have to realize with Zach too is like it's not like, oh, he's just bad and they're just deciding to go all in for Rodgers. Like he was historically bad as a draft pick, like Jamarcus Russell level bad with the Jets. And maybe I'm being a little bit harsh, but come on. The thing I thought about Rodgers and I'm going to go through the quarterbacks right now, Kyle. In your opinion, I can't see your face right now. I have a list of quarterbacks just so I can make it a little bit easier myself. But I want you to where you feel Rodgers, whether it be on the Jets or on another team, will be next year. Like what type of quarterback is he? Because I would say like that 5 to 10 range, but I kind of want to hone in on your opinion. We have to go through stats and all this stuff, quarterback versus quarterback, but a general feel right now, heat of the moment on what quarterback he is in the NFL. So and I think somebody is whatever. Yeah, we have Mahomes above him, right? I can't see you. Mahomes.
Yeah, Mahomes.
Hurts is next on this list. We'll put Hurts there. Joe Burrow, okay, obviously. Josh Allen is 4. Justin Herbert, 5. Okay. 6 is Trevor Lawrence. Okay, fine. Trevor Lawrence would be better than him, which could be debatable.
Wait, hold on though. Can we pause for a moment?
Right.
I don't think you really believe that Jalen Hurts is better than Aaron Rodgers.
So I'm being generous right now.
That.
That's what I'm saying. Hurts and even Lawrence. Like Lawrence could be very good, but who's to say Rodgers in a new offense being healthy this year can't be a top 5 quarterback again? But even if we're going to be generous and say Hurts is better, Lawrence is better, which I don't necessarily agree with. I would say Lawrence more than Hurts, but nonetheless, past that, Kyle.
I'm sorry. If Hurts, you put Hurts on the Jets last year. I'm sorry, his numbers are going to be way worse than what they were with the Eagles. Like they have a really good situation. Their offensive line is so good. They're stacked at receiver now. They got one of the best tight ends in the league. And one of the things that makes Hurts a pretty good player, and credit to him, he's gotten a lot better over the years, right? Like someone like Zach Wilson, who just didn't improve, like give credit to Hurts. Like he got better year after year after year. And if we're talking straight pocket passer, him versus Aaron Rodgers, no way. And Aaron Rodgers recently.
So we don't want to give it to Hurts.
I wouldn't. I mean, like, listen, could Hurts? I mean, by the way, look at Hurts' throwing motion. Look how long his release is. He has like a windy type of release. I'm sorry, I would not put Hurts over Aaron Rodgers.
And again, for people like, oh my God, we're not talking about MVP Rodgers, 2020 Rodgers, 2021 Rodgers. We're assuming a little bit of a drop off, and that happens. Sometimes we're hoping for that quarterback. Maybe he could be closer to that quarterback in 2023 to the 2021, 2020 Rodgers than he was in 2022. But at the end of the day, he's going to be 39 and guys drop off. He's going to be 40. So, okay, let's even give Lawrence the nod over him, which I think is still even maybe a little bit of a reach. But right now, you'd have him at 6. Stop me if you think any of these guys are better than him, because he's some of the guys on the list. Again, I can't hear you. Tua, Goff, Geno, Dak, Brady's gone. Lamar Jackson,
no.
Okay, Justin Fields, Brock Purdy, Kyler Murray, Kirk Cousins. So we're talking about what the 5th or 6th best quarterback in the league for at least next year. Now I want to do the same thing with Derek Carr, right? So we have Mahomes. Do you want to give it to Hurts over Carr? We'll give it to Hurts over Carr.
Yeah, sure.
We'll give Burrow. We'll give Allen. That's 4. We'll give Herbert. We'll give Lawrence. We'll give Rodgers. That is 7. Stop me when you think one of these guys is better than him, and I think there'll be some debates. Tua, Goff, Geno, Dak.
Geno. Geno definitely has the upside over him, and Geno was fine last year, so maybe. You're
telling me right now one starter to win you more games next year, Geno or Carr?
I mean, and the thing is, sometimes people have they kind of have like a unique type of year, it's like an asterisk, like, oh, like that, like every like, I don't want to say every player, but sometimes the guys have like a standout year. I mean, the Carr's at least been consistent. Geno has to show consistently that he can do this. So I'm fine with giving it to Carr over Geno.
Yeah, Carr.
Geno does have a higher upside. Yeah.
Actually,
maybe not. Honestly, I mean, like I do think that Carr has more impressive arm. Truthfully, Geno is just like what he can do with his legs, and he did make a couple of plays with his legs against the Jets.
So we have 6 above. We have 6 above him, 7 above him with Rodgers. I would let's give him Lamar Jackson. Let's assume he's healthy.
Let's say Lamar.
Dak, I think is Dak is arguable, right? But even let's give him Kirk. Let's give him Dak. That's 10. That's 10 in the league. So past that, again, Tua, Goff, Geno, Brady's gone. Justin Fields, Purdy, Murray, Daniel Jones. So let's say he's in that 11 to 12 to 13. Let's say 11 to 13 range, which is probably higher than I thought I would have him after we're doing this list. But nonetheless, for you, kind of going through that.
Did you mention Lawrence? Did you mention Trevor Lawrence?
Yeah. Lawrence was a 6 above him, easily, whatever. So would you rather, to you, Kyle, and this is obviously your opinion, nobody else's, but right now in terms of Carr versus Rodgers, let's just say we had Carr at 12, we had Rodgers at 6. Rodgers is going to cost a little bit more. He has a chance of retiring after a year. He's a little bit more volatile than Carr, where Carr could be here for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And then a big part of this equation is, to me at least, and I'm not trying to sway you in any way, but it's the time period for making a decision. If you're telling me right now, Carr, Rodgers, they're both available right now, I am completely cool with going for either one. I completely get it. My problem is Carr is available right now, where Rodgers might decide to play, not play in a month or two when Carr is gone, and then you miss out on both guys. So is the difference between Rodgers being here and Carr being here worth the risk of missing out on both of them? To me, it's not. You get the guy who's available right now, because if you strike and miss on both, Kyle, I'm going to lose my shit. If it's Jimmy G, if it's Tannehill, if it's any one of these guys over Carr or Rodgers, because we started to go balls deep for one of those guys. So what's your general opinion on which way you'd rather go as a Jets fan in general, as an analysis?
I think the best way to kind of sum this up in a really short way is the difference of thinking with your mind versus your heart. My heart says, oh, Aaron Rodgers, because, I kind of really grew up watching football and like just loving Aaron Rodgers and like just so jealous of like Packers fans and yeah, I guess like Patriots fans and anybody who had, Colts fans at the time who had Peyton Manning and said, man, must be really nice to have that franchise quarterback who you could just rely on week in, week out. And he's one of the all-time greats. It would be so cool to like, go to games and see like, oh man, yeah, we had Aaron Rodgers, man. Like, so it's like my heart tells me Rodgers, but my mind is telling me Carr just because of longevity. I assume that you give up a decent amount less in terms of compensation. The contract seems much more manageable. I think I said longevity already. So yeah. But if you're telling me that I can get them for the same value, if you're telling me I can get them for the same compensation, trade what I have to trade away, I'm taking Rodgers. Even if I do have him for less years, I'll worry about the future when that comes. Right. And listen, if you're Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh, I saw there was some discussion in the chat about, hot seat and whether it's warm or hot. It's definitely warm. Whether or not it's hot, I mean, like, listen, neither of these guys have had a winning season yet. And Woody Johnson can be a little bit impatient. And the NFL, and listen, we were just talking about Hackett. He didn't even get a full season. Like, you got to start winning. And listen, you want to talk, the Jets had a collapse at the end of the Favre year, and, Mangini, bye-bye Mangini. Right. The Jets just had a 6-game collapse here. Like, I think Woody Johnson, what was it, a day or two ago, sent out like a tweet or an Instagram post, happy birthday, coach, to Robert Saleh. And I think he generally likes him, but he's definitely not happy with the way the last season ended. So you need to win ASAP. So I think in their minds, if, they might not be, hey, listen, if we have to give up a little extra for Aaron Rodgers versus Carr, they might be willing to do it because Joe Douglas might not have those picks to be drafting in the next 2 to 3 years if he doesn't start winning games.
Well, one, we know obviously that the compensation is not going to be the same. And again, but even if the compensation is more for Rodgers, I'm okay if he's available right now. But me personally, I can't just skip on Carr to hope for the possibility of Rodgers. That's the big worry. And with Rodgers, just in terms of the play too, like, who's to say that this year doesn't work out as well as he wants to, and he retires after a year, and then we're sitting there after 1 year like, shit, we made the playoffs, we lost in the divisional round, and now Rodgers is gone. What the hell did we do? Kind of sitting there in no man's land. So 1 versus 1, I'd rather have Rodgers for a year or two, but the compensation, the volatility of him potentially retiring, and the timeline of them both being traded for leads me to lean more to Carr, who we just said is the 11th or 12th best quarterback in the league. And people say he can't, and this is the comment I talked to Scott about this. We were texting about it, and we kind of feel the same way. He can't hang with Burrow or Mahomes. Burrow, and listen,
Scott was texting me about that too.
Okay, yeah, we were talking about it, and we had the same thoughts. I literally wrote it down, and then he texted me 20 minutes later because I was at work and I wrote it down. Burrow in the last game against the Chiefs defense isn't a monster defense. He had 270 yards, 26 completions, 1 touchdown, 2 picks, which should have been 3 picks if Trent McDuffie had hands. Who I love Trent McDuffie, but like one of those first plays, it was an easy pick to Trent McDuffie. He dropped it. Yeah. And just in the playoffs in general, Burrow put up 19 points last year versus Tennessee. He almost lost to Tyler Huntley. Carr beat Herbert this year, which people don't talk about. He put up 29 points versus the Chiefs, where Burrow put up 20. You had Allen this year. Again, he can't hang with Allen. Allen put up, and again, I'm not saying he's better than these guys. Allen put up 10 points versus the Bengals. Rodgers last year put up what? Was it 7 or 10 points versus the 49ers in that game, and still almost won that game? So why do we act like you can't hang with these quarterbacks? People act like they, the games are 50-43 because of the quarterbacks are just absolute money. Like, can Carr put up 20 points a game with the Jets or 23 points versus the Chiefs and win that game? Like, who's to say he can't do that?
It's really important
to say you can't hang with these guys.
It is so important to remember And us as Jets fans, just seeing the utter incompetence at quarterback for the past, majority of the past 2 decades, I guess even more than that. But, I certainly haven't been following that closely since then. We kind of tend to forget this, but like quarterback is the most important position in all sports. There's no doubt about that. But it is very important to remember that football is a team sport and talent around you makes so much of a difference. And we outlined that really good stat before about Derek Carr, about how he's never had a defense finished more higher than 22nd or something like that. So he's never even had an average defense in 9 years. I'm sorry, Derek Carr would have won a hell of a lot more games if he had more competent defenses. Imagine Derek Carr was on the Steelers for the last 9 years of his career, right? Who, they might not be the Steelers defenses of the earlier 2000s that we remember, or the 90s or the 70s, right? Like the Steelers have always had pretty solid defenses, but they have solid defenses year in, year out. I'm sorry, Carr would have won a hell of a lot more regular season games and probably more playoff games too. Tom Brady, right? Tom Brady, I have no problem calling him the GOAT, right? No problem at all. I mean, just the way that how much he loves the game, how much he cares about winning, how consistently healthy he was, his passion, the way, how smart he is. He's certainly, very talented in many. Tom Brady, there's a reason. There was a stat that I saw. Ari, I forget how to pronounce his last name. Myrov. He works for My Sports Update on Twitter. He sent out the tweet yesterday that Tom Brady retires with 7 Super Bowls, which is more than all 32 NFL franchises. And it's a crazy stat, crazy true stat. I'm sorry though. And part of it is the Bucs obviously upgraded when they got Tom Brady, but they already had a solid roster in between that. They just had Jameis Winston tossing 30 interceptions before that. But Tom Brady would not have won that many Super Bowls if he wasn't with the Patriots. They had really solid rosters year in, year out. You could say maybe there were some more talented teams, but then it was coaching. It's a combination of things. And that's what we need to remember. But Carr, has he had some talent the past couple of years and stuff, but he still never had a good defense and stuff. So the idea that, he can't hang with some of these guys, no one's saying that Carr's as good as those other guys and stuff. But if you have the other pieces around, exactly. Coaching is still a toss-up for me. I'm not necessarily sold on Salah, but I don't dislike him. I'm kind of lukewarm. All right. I do like some of the pieces, especially look at this last draft that the Jets had. There's some solid pieces going forward. If you have a solid roster around a pretty decent quarterback, things can happen, right? Joe Flacco. We saw Joe Flacco the past couple of years with the Jets. Let's not forget that Joe Flacco won a Super Bowl, and he was Super Bowl MVP 10 years ago. Joe Flacco was a Jag for his whole career. So the idea that, he can't hang with Joe Flacco hung with Tom Brady several playoff games in Foxborough. Nobody in their right mind would.
Jimmy G has made it far. Obviously, Brock Purdy just made it as far as he did. Mark Sanchez made it far into the playoffs. If you have a solid team around him, you can hang. It's not just quarterback versus quarterback. It's it's just a very simple line of thinking. That's a wins or a quarterback stat. Again, Zach Wilson 5-2. He was great, right? It's part of it is the team around him as well. And with Carr.
And listen,
obviously,
Joe Burrow's great too, but you think Joe Burrow would be, and granted, one thing that Joe Burrow, people underestimate his athleticism. I think I even did too. I still think he does have one of the weaker arms for legit, out of all those starters that you named, we're talking about the good quarterbacks, Joe Burrow has the weakest arm out of all of them, but he is really good. For head up, he's a really smart quarterback. But he's got really good escapability too. It is hard to sack him sometimes. He's very good at extending plays. He did that one podcast interview where he kind of beautifully said who cares about a third down sack? If I get sacked on third down, so what? I'm punting it away. I'm going to try to extend the play as long as I can to try to get the first down. Right? But you think Joe Burrow would be as good as he is if he didn't have those good receivers? And I'm sorry, T Higgins, he's another guy I was totally wrong on. I didn't I didn't watch a ton of his tape at Clemson. I didn't think he was that good. He's a stud, man. He's a stud. Chase is a stud. Those players are also making him better as well. So I don't mean it's the idea that you can't hang with someone. It's football is a team game. Quarterback, no doubt, is the most important position in sports.
Yeah.
I feel like I could organize my thoughts better and get this out clearer, but anyway.
No,
Sorry,
no,
Paul.
it's hard when you're on the spot, and people don't necessarily always think about that. But,
Well, at least you're agreeing with me that it's I'm saying it in a very shitty way.
It's just like I think people act like these no, but people act like these games with these quarterbacks. It's like 51-50. Like it's not the case. In some of these playoff games, quarterbacks are putting up 14, 17, 20 points, and if the defense is good enough to not let the Chiefs score over 20 points, can the Jets with Dak Prescott, with Derek Carr put up 23 points in the Chiefs? Like they put up 20 versus the Bengals and got lucky to get 23. So I don't think it's a situation where it's quarterback versus quarterback. If you talk about quarterback versus quarterback, no, you can't hang with Burrow. You can't hang with Mahomes. That's not what football is. It's, like you said, it's a team game. Now, something else I want to talk about really quickly. I have 4 more things, or at least 3 more things I want to get into before I get back into the chat. So we kind of have to expedite a little bit, Kyle.
Well, we should get to Johnny Hector's super chat.
Okay, yeah. And then we'll go.
Yeah. So Johnny Hector, 17, $10. Thank you, Johnny. What do you think about Jameis Winston as a possibility? Can we just say hell no?
You're talking about very.
He's an upgrade over Zach Wilson. There's no doubt about that. He's an upgrade over Zach Wilson, but
he's a low end starter.
Yeah,
I mean, he would be better to me than Brissett. He'd be better than Bridgewater. He'd be better to me, even better than Gardner Minshew. But at that point, like, did you miss it? You missed out on Rodgers, Carr, Jimmy G, Tannehill, and now we're going to Jameis. Now we're going to Jameis Winston. So something would have went really, really wrong for Jameis Winston to be the starter. If he is the starter for 2023 opening day, something went massively wrong for the Jets. So I think it's better than Minshew and some of the other guys, but it would be dreadful if he was a starter.
Yeah.
So, and thank you for the super chat, Johnny. The other question I want to ask you, Kyle, I think his contract for the next 2 years is like a little bit over $30 million. I'm not even sure if he would be traded, but let's say obviously Lamar is with the Ravens. Rodgers retires. We wait on Rodgers like idiots, and Carr is with the Falcons. Dak Prescott. That was my mystery quarterback last year for a mystery quarterback option for the Jets. If he were to go on the market, which we have no idea if he would he, to me, he would be the 4th quarterback option. I think he's kind of in that range with Derek Carr. And we could put Cousins above him. We could put whoever else above him. But I feel like Dak Prescott's in that 12 to 15 range, just like Carr is. So would you be willing to trade something for a Dak Prescott and again, I'm not going with the contracts, but I think it'd be right around like $30 to $35 million a year for the next 2 years to be a quarterback who again could potentially get you to the playoffs and maybe make a little bit of a run. I know he hasn't performed very well in the playoffs, but let's not act like his coaching and his team is great necessarily around him. And I know that he was obviously disappointing in the game against the Niners, but to me he'd be option number 4.
Yeah. So if you remember when I sent you that picture of myself with Ashton Davis, the person who I was with in the picture who was wearing a Cowboys jersey is one of my students who graduated many years ago. And he's a big Cowboys fan, but he kind of likes the Jets. I guess like if he has an AFC team, they're the Jets. And he was on Twitter bitching about Dak. Oh, Dak, come on. I think we got to get rid of Dak. I think we got to trade Dak. And I was like, dude, be careful what you wish for, man. Like, you think the grass is always greener on the other side. And listen, Dak is far from a perfect quarterback. There's many guys I would take before him, but Dak is pretty solid.
Probably about 12. It's fine. Yeah.
But dude, I mean, if you want to compare what you saw from Dak over the years compared to what we saw from Zach Wilson the past couple of years, I mean, like, come on, or Sam Darnold, it's tough when you have a quarterback who's making the salary that he is, and you want him to be producing more. But I mean, that's kind of the problem with the NFL. I saw somebody say something like, who was it? I feel like it was some former NFL quarterback. I could be wrong. Who was saying something like, it's going to kill me that I can't remember his exact tweet. He was saying something along the lines, this is me very broadly paraphrasing, that we have a big problem in the NFL that it seems like the next quarterback contract is almost always the highest, even though when their talent and level of play doesn't necessitate that. But it's like, that's the price that you pay for having competent level quarterback play, right?
Isn't that kind of the same with all positions, though? Like it's kind of the same with all positions.
Yeah, kind of. But I mean, especially quarterback, though, especially.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's no doubt salaries keep rising. Nobody's disputing that. But like quarterback, it always seems like the next guy's like breaking the bank and almost setting like a record breaking contract. And then you'll get someone who like Kyler, like he just signed a massive deal. Now, it might not have been top of the league or whatever, but it's certainly very much near there. Yeah, listen, to answer your question, I would take Dak. I'd be decently excited about it, but you'd have to trade more to get Dak than you would someone like Carr.
Would he be like option three?
Would you have to trade more to get Dak than Aaron Rodgers? And the only reason I asked that is because of age. Like Dak's.
Yeah, I think it might be similar because of the age factor and how much the Cowboys have to eat as well. So
yeah, I'm all right. So I definitely
second round picks for Prescott. Like,
yes, I would if I didn't have some of the other options first. Like I would definitely
he's option 4 to me.
I would definitely take Rodgers and Carr for what they're expected to go for before I would take Dak.
Mm-hmm.
And
okay,
honestly, truthfully too, Lamar Jackson would cost more in a trade than Dak would. And is Lamar better than Dak? Sure, I guess. All things considered, as a pure pocket passer, I don't necessarily think so. I would definitely take Dak for what he's going to go for versus Lamar Jackson, what he could go for.
I don't think Lamar's really an option at this point. I think he's going to stay with the Ravens. So to me, it's Rodgers or Carr. Again, I'll be very, very excited with Rodgers for what he could be, and I think he has the highest Super Bowl probability for the Jets in the next 2 years. But obviously, waiting for Rodgers is a big part of what I'm saying. And then past that, it's like Prescott in his own tier at tier 2, and then past that, it's Jimmy G and Tannehill, which I'll just be so depressed. But I want to get to 3 more topics and run through the chats and do these kind of quick. I'm going to read some stuff like almost verbatim from what we put in an article for JetX for Keith Carter, the new offensive line coach for the Jets, but he has connections to some of the Jets' top coaches. He was with Saleh in 2012 and 2013. Carter was the the Seahawks offensive quality control coach. Saleh was the Seattle's defensive quality control coach over the same time. Good running game, apparently. Obviously, Henry helped in that. People kind of talk about his last year with the Titans. They were ranked, I think, to the bottom of the league, but they were decimated by injuries. He had mostly a top 5-ish run game over the last 4 years. Another quote from the article, which I think was done by Nania, maybe Rivka, something like that. But over the past 5 seasons, 2018 to 2022, over that span, Carter helped the Titans rank second in rushing yards per game with 139.9 yards per game. Obviously, those rushing yards can be largely attributed to Derrick Henry, but the Titans' offensive line also played a part in that success. And then you have the Taylor Lewan comment, which obviously was not very good about Carter, but he said, quote, Keith and I have had a very up and down relationship, and I think it's ended at a much higher point, Lewan said. Quote, when Keith first got there, the way he came in and the way he was trying to act towards everybody, like very disrespectful, very authoritative, but a very like dictatorship type of way, was his quote. So I'm okay. I want to study him a little bit more. And I don't think necessarily having a dictator type is the worst for the Jets offensive line that they have right now. You have Laken Tomlinson, who needs to be held accountable. You have Mekhi Becton, who, like it or not, needs to be held accountable a little bit in some of the way he acts. But obviously that can go one or two ways. Becton could respond positive to that or completely shy away and hate him. But overall, obviously a good Titans running game over the past couple of years. This year they struggled with a lot of injuries, but overall I'm indifferent on it. I want to study him more. I don't really have a lot of background information. I would like to watch a clinic or two of him if I can find one and then have a little bit more to report. So
yeah, I don't know that I can comment on him at all specifically. I mean, certainly the Titans have had good running games in recent years, but I think what you said, like, Derrick Henry is definitely a stud. I mean, like when you want to talk about like he's kind of like a freak, how many guys that big have that just kind of long speed where they can pull away from people, or you could, they're so big that they can just lunge forward in a short yardage situation, whether it be on the goal line or 4th and 1, and just, kind of crash forward and get that first down. And then he's got that amazing stiff arm ability where it's just like, if he gets out in open space, good luck bringing him down in open space.
I have a follow-up question. I'm curious if you know about this, because they initially Henry was good, but he wasn't like Henry what he is now in his first couple of years.
Yeah.
Was it Keith Carter who changed their system to an outside zone scheme? Because he got a lot better when he was outside zone and he was able to build up a little bit before hitting a lot of scrimmage. So I'm curious if he was a part of why he became successful and used him in outside zone instead of whatever he was running, inside zone or whatever it might have been before Keith Carter. I wonder if he had a part in that. But regardless, a good offensive line the last couple of years, minus last year, decimated by injuries. So I don't love the fact that Taylor Lewan is coming out and saying that, but Taylor Lewan's also kind of a little bit of a whiny bitch. So
he's probably considered one of the biggest jerks in the league, right? I keep seeing this, like, this clip is not even recent, it's old, but like there's a clip from a couple of years ago where Lewan is kind of taunting Josh Norman on the Redskins sideline, and he's like pointing to him, and like Josh Norman gets up in his face and kind of like tries to punch him. But like Lewan has been involved in, so many, arguments, and he's got so many like personal vendettas against other players throughout the league and stuff. So I almost want to say that it kind of says more about him than it does about the coach, but who the hell knows?
Yeah, if it was like Joe Stanley or like one of these guys, I'd put more into it. But you have one of the offensive, like one of the notorious douchebags of the offensive line who lets his thoughts be known. Maybe Lewan tried to walk in there with his chest out and thinking he was hot shit, and the coach was not going to have any of that bullshit. So I'm not going to pour too much into it. If it was more of a reliable source who didn't complain and whine all the time, it would be a little bit different. But two more topics really quick, Kyle, and we'll get into the chat. We'll close it up. I'm obviously very far behind in the chat, and I gotta finish. I gotta figure out eventually how to manage it better. But I don't like to just skip over everybody. But then we're completely off of the timing. I heard something today, and again, there's so many smoke screens and bullshit sources out there. NFL rumors and Don Cliveman, whatever the hell his name is, and Tony Pauline, and all these idiots on Twitter. But people are talking about Quincy Williams and saying his price tag might be around $6 or $7 million. What would be your highest price tag for
I think
Quincy?
we talked about this last week. It was something I think we were both kind of comfortable with around 6 or 7. I think we said that last 2 weeks ago, didn't we?
I would say around more like, dude, is he really worth 6 or 7? Like I think he's good and the splash plays are great, but then the bad plays are also very, very bad. So I would be more comfortable with like 4 or 5.
Yeah.
I think you might be able to get a linebacker for who is similar in production for even 3 or 4 than Quincy is. But then the problem with that, I don't think Q's necessarily going to sign here if Quincy's here. He'll probably sign first, but $7 million for Quincy and how volatile his play is and how up and down it is, I think that's too high. I think the highest I'm willing to go is 5 or 6, just because you look at the NFL linebackers who are signed nowadays, like Nicholas Morrow, a guy we liked a lot last year. I think he went to the Bears, was like $2 or $3 million. Look at what Quan did for us this year. I think him and Quincy were on a similar level. He got $1.5 million. So who's to say you can't get a guy for $3-4 million for what Quincy would provide you at 7? So the highest, maybe 5 or 6, but you're talking about $7 million for Quincy Williams. I think he's starting to get out of his price range of what he's actually.
Yeah, I think it's an overpay, and he definitely did improve from year 1 to year 2 with the Jets, but I don't think it was nearly the improvement that some people thought it was. And again, love Nania. Nania does some really great work. Probably, maybe the best work over at Jets X Factor when you do all things considered. But I remember he had a tweet after the Packers game where he said that Quincy's like really put it all together. And granted, that was kind of like it wasn't even midseason yet, so might have been jumping the gun a little bit, but and sometimes, and sometimes people try to like be out in front, like, oh, I was one of the first people that said this. I'm not trying to get into what Michael's intentions were or whatever, but I don't think he's put it all together yet, and he definitely someone like Quincy moves really well, but a lot of like pass coverage is just kind of like also understanding route combinations and knowing when to pass things off and stuff, and he still really struggles in that area too. And like you said, like he overruns plays. Like for every big time hit that he has where he stuffs someone at the line of scrimmage and then slams them down and then hypes all his teammates up and they're all doing the whole whatever it is, uppercut, bowling throw, or whatever the hell that thing is. For every one of those, there might be a play where, let's say a team runs outside zone and Quincy over pursues, and then the running back makes a cutback, and they have a crease where they get a 12-yard gain. Right.
Yeah, so, it's more, and I think he improved more in the run game this year, but his processing on some like route combinations, like the 1 to the 2, 3 to 2, guy in the flat, matching the seam with the 3, whatever it may be. He's a slow processor in terms of coverage. So that's where he really bothers me, is in coverage. Run game, it is what it is. I think he improved. It's still not great, like you said, like over pursuing or running himself into traffic. But I just don't think he's worth $6 or $7 million. in general. Anything you want to hit on that before we get into? I want to hit a comment from Rich from last week. Let's
prioritize Alex super chat and then we can get to Rich's thing. All right. Alex says for $10, thank you, Alex. Appreciate it. In the doomsday scenario where Rodgers, Carr, Lamar, or Jimmy don't come, should Joe Douglas trade for Love and re-sign? Who's MW? Why am I blanking out on that? Mike White, and stockpile 2024 picks. Starting Brissett, Mayfield makes you worse in the short and long term. Honestly, I'm not trading for Jordan Love. I have not seen. I think his college tape was a little shaky. Sure, sitting the bench for 3 years against Aaron Rodgers, I'm sure that did wonders to help him improve as a player. But he's very much an uncertain. I'm not banking my future on an uncertain where I'm probably going to have to trade a decent amount to get him. And thing is like if you trade for him, it's kind of like a Sam Darnold scenario where if you trade for him, all good. If you trade for him, you're not trading a second round pick or whatever it is, second round. Let's say it's a second round and more to say that he's not the starter of the future. You're probably gonna have to pick up his 5th-year option. That's what Carolina did when they kind of saw bad tape of Sam Darnold, but said, you know, we're comfortable enough to trade for him. It was a second round, a 4th round, and then whatever else. And then they picked up his 5th-year option. 5th-year options aren't cheap. Now, granted, Love was a late first-round pick versus Sam Darnold was 3rd overall, so the 5th-year option would be cheaper. But I don't know. I feel like I have not nearly seen enough from Jordan Love to be impressed at all. Like I saw when Rodgers was hurt, not last year, but the year before, Jordan Love started against the Chiefs. That Packers offense was not nearly what it was with Rodgers. He was bad in that game. He played
like under 30 snaps this year. He played 10 snaps versus Philly. And yeah, he was 6 for 9, 113 yards, 1 touchdown. But we're gonna trade a second round pick for one showing. We're like, okay, that's impressive. It's one game. Minnesota week 1, I guess he came in for a little bit in garbage time because they were losing. So the Vikings are going to play tight coverage, 4 for 5, 65 yards. Like this is what we're talking about. We're talking about a guy in his career in the NFL has 83 attempts, 60 completion percentage, 3 touchdowns, 3 picks. That's a very, very small sample size to hit your career to. So I'm not trading for Love unless it's like a 4th round pick or something like that, which is going to take more than that. But if the Jets and JD and Saleh are hitching their jobs to sign or trade for Love and re-sign Mike White, something went very wrong. I'm not down for Brissett or Mayfield, but 2 or 3 options that you didn't mention here that I'd rather have over those guys. What happened to Tannehill in this situation? Where is Dak Prescott? Or the Cowboys going to – I don't think they're going to trade him, to be honest. I think they'll roll with him. But Dak, Tannehill, and another guy who I'd rather have than Love or Mike White. I'd rather have Jameis Winston than one of those guys. I mean, we brought him up before, but I think he might be even better than some of those guys. I don't know what his contract is. But nonetheless –
the thing about Jameis Winston is you can score points with Jameis Winston. He throws with enough anticipation and confidence that you will move the ball down the field, but those turnovers will kill you.
Brutal. So I'm going to read a comment from Rich. Kyle, so you have to listen because it's a little bit long, but I wanted to hit it with some attention. It said, I just want to clarify where you stand on this, even though it doesn't really matter anymore. I guess I'm the only one left who feels LaFleur wasn't a huge problem and actually was pretty good in some ways. I get the red zone problems, to some degree, although some of it was skewed in my eyes. And I would definitely agree with 3rd and 4th down play calling a little strange at times. But to me, a good offensive coordinator schemes guys open. I saw plenty of that. I also find it hilarious the fans would attack him regardless of what he did. If we were down and needed to throw the ball more to win, he would get criticized for not running the ball enough. In the moment, it seemed like the right thing to do, and a lot of criticism was in hindsight. Then he runs the ball 6 consecutive times or however many times it was to run the ball and win the game, the final drive to beat the Bills, and gets very little acknowledgement of how good that was. Also gets little credit for how great Mike White looked more often than not this season. I find it weird, but I don't know. Clearly, I'm wrong because it feels like me against the world. Feel like your thoughts about this. And then he said, my personal thoughts are that he could easily fix the red zone, 3rd down issues. So he's basically saying, like, I don't want to read there's a little bit more to this, but I think he's defending LaFleur a little bit, and I guess saying that he shouldn't have been fired or he doesn't understand exactly why he was fired. But I kind of think we went over this at least a little bit. I think he's more mid to below average, but a big problem with LaFleur's, and I understand the firing. I think he might have been maybe a little bit of a scapegoat, but not necessarily like a full scapegoat. But third down was a problem. Fourth down was a problem. You like the fact that he would go empty on third and short at times would bug the hell out of me. The red zone play calling against the Vikings bothered the hell out of me. Some of the concepts that would bother me in terms of you have Zach Wilson who's struggling to hold the ball and he panics with some pressure in the pocket. You have an offensive line that's banged up, and LaFleur would be running vertical concepts 14 yards past the sticks on third and two.
Too much play action where Zach Wilson, who's not confident, he's got his back turned to the defense for
back turned to the defense. You have third and two, third and three plays where the first guy is breaking at 15 yards down the field with an offensive line that's balls. You have a guy whose red zone play calling was bad. His third and short play calling was bad. Again, against the Vikings, we can go into the whole thing, but he got to the red zone trick play, and we'd be set back. He got to the goal line, and it's third and 1 from the 1 yard line, or third and goal from the 1 yard line, and you're going empty. You have no threat of running the ball there, so the linebackers aren't going to have to read that, and they're not going to allow the wide receivers to sneak behind him. You have situations where, again, he ran all these orbit motions, these jet motions, all this stuff, and he never threw the ball to them, so the defense never has to adjust to said motion, or doesn't kind of like take their attention away. And then you also had you have Garrett Wilson coming out who had some problems. You had a couple of other guys who had problems with him, and obviously the quarterback. You have Elijah Moore who's running on the outside a lot of the first part of the season. So I don't think he was just a scapegoat where nothing was the matter with him. He had plenty of flaws as well. Now, do I think he's the worst OC in the world? Yeah, there were some guys open, but the way he adjusted to Zach Wilson in terms of not being able to hold onto the ball and the play action stuff and the deep shots on third and short, like there's plenty of problems with LaFleur. So I'm fine with him being fired, but it wasn't like I was clamoring for him to be fired at the same time either.
Yeah. So I think you outlined a big portion of like what the problem with him was, and you kind of mentioned this at the tail end. Like I pulled up this comment right as you were kind of hitting on it. Mike's problem may have been dealing with the players. I mean, think about that comment he made towards Mekhi Becton. And I know that Saleh also kind of had a weird way of kind of addressing the whole Mekhi Becton situation to the media and stuff. It's like, is Becton your star? Did he really earn that title? I mean, you drafted him 11th overall, but just kind of like weird comments and stuff. And I thought especially like the one like, oh, Mekhi's not working. So I forget exactly what it was, but Becton was like really like weirded out by it. And he always takes to Twitter and, kind of wears his emotions on his sleeve or whatever. The whole thing with Elijah Moore and the way that he was using him and then them having the blow up, obviously he didn't relate very well to the players. And I think in his mind, meaning LaFleur, he kind of thought he was some kind of young hotshot genius. I mean, he's basically my age, 33, 34, and he has an offensive coordinator job in the NFL. I mean, like, that might get to your head a little bit. You might think that you're the next young genius who's going to get a head coaching job and take the NFL by storm. So I think there was a little bit of that.
Him and Zach Wilson too, like recently, where he came.
Yeah. So apparently he didn't want Zach Wilson, and he kind of tried to make that known or whatever. So I think there's a lot of that too. But I think for me, towards the end of the season, and I'm very much like a student of the game, but like, and I'm saying this trying to be humble and saying I don't know the answers. It's easy to point out the problems, but not always necessarily know the solutions. But I can honestly say and obviously when you lose a guy like Breece Hall and you lose Elijah Vera Tucker, your run game is going to take a huge dip. There's no doubt about it. But if you watch those last 6 games of the season, they had such a problem with, I'm not just talking about getting movement in the run game, because a lot of that can be attributed to talent, but just like some of the fronts that defenses were obviously stacking the box. They weren't scared that Zach Wilson was going to hurt them. They weren't scared that Mike White on some bum ribs was going to hurt them. They weren't scared that the, statue that's always been Joe Flacco, especially old age Joe Flacco, was going to hurt them. I get that. But some of the fronts that, that LaFleur was running against, just like, if you look at like Miami, who runs a lot of odd fronts and stuff, like just some of the run designs that LaFleur was trying to run against, it's just like you had so many players. I'm talking about players running free at the line of scrimmage. Literally, there was no block accounting for them. Like literally, there was in the blocking scheme, there was no player on the Jets that could even lay a hand on some of these defenders. They were running free, causing havoc in the backfield. making stops. And to me, that now, could I draw up a better running game plan than Mike LaFleur? No, I can't at all. There's a reason why he has that job and I don't. But like I said, I don't always know the solutions, but I can see some of the problems. And I'm telling you, just from a coaching standpoint, the running game was pretty much a problem all year. You had some moments with Breece Hall, but like even in those early weeks before Breece Hall kind of like really emerged, like those first 3-4 weeks, like the run game is bad against the Ravens. And the thing is what happened? The run game overall, I'm talking from like a blocking perspective, creating space from your angles that you're creating in the blocking was better last year. And you're talking as an offensive coordinator from year 1 to year 2, you took a decline in that department. That's alarming. So I was fine with him getting fired for that reason.
And even the running game when it was working, and don't quote me on this, but when it was working for Breece Hall, it was more chunk plays than consistent 5-10 yard runs. It was like
it's Breece Hall creating on his own sometimes too. The Packers run that you watched in person.
Yeah. But so you have problem with the running game, you have problem with third downs with your personnel and your usage threatening pass or run. You have deep shots on third and short with a quarterback and offensive line that's struggling to throw the ball vertically because of the time it takes. You have not building off of concepts. You have red zone problems. Like there was problems with LaFleur for sure. And on top of all that, players clearly didn't like him very much. So I don't think that he just had some problems. There was quite a few with LaFleur. So I'm okay with him getting fired. So,
and I'll also say this too. This should be obvious to everyone, but I blame most of Zach Wilson's problems on Zach Wilson. I think that overall the players that they surrounded around him were good enough for him to do much better than what he did. But at the same time, you also have to lump some of the blame on Mike LaFleur because he more so than anyone else from the coaching staff is in charge of developing him and doing what works well for him. And how could Zach Wilson be as good as he was in 2020 in college and be as bad as he was for 2 years in the NFL? I at least have to put some blame on Mike LaFleur.
Oh, for sure. Jonathan Richter talks about Hackett being a great culture addition, which is a part of it. Obviously, you want as a good coach in general, but apparently he's a very likable guy and players really like him. Hype says he loves fact-based shows, no assumptions. I hope he's talking about us. We appreciate that. Craig Carr said he liked reading Jets X Factor. I think it was the other guy. Yeah, I think we wrote an article on it, but I think it was the other guy. Evan Roberts does it with Craig Carton, and they were talking about Jets X Factor. And they're talking about NYJ Matt, like, oh, NYJ Matt's the best guy on Twitter and all this stuff. And then the guy was like, oh, well, no, it's Jets X Factor. And then I guess they don't realize that NJ Matt is part of Jets X Factor. So he's talking about Jets X Factor versus Jets X Factor. But
that's funny.
Okay. Let's see. I watched
apparently Rivka said it wasn't Craig Carton, it was Evan.
Yeah. This is way too broad of a statement, Jonathan. No offense, but you saw a lot of Zach Wilson tendencies. What tendencies are you talking about? But Carr is a top 10 to 15 quarterback.
If you're talking about throwing a swing route or a design screen to receiver 5 yards over his head, I'm sorry, I don't see any of those tendencies with Derek Carr.
Yeah, what are the same tendencies? I don't see many of them. Rodgers is a solid guy. Joe is back. Kyle in the house too. Why did y'all switch sides? I think it's because Kyle was in here first, I guess, right?
Yeah,
I think that's how it's determined who's on the left of your screen. Who is in here first. So you can always know who's the later one. So today it was me. Carr isn't going to come to the Jets, and people are talking about why. I guess why he wouldn't come. But like, who are his other options right now? Like, who do you see as the main competitors for Carr? Or even Rodgers at this point? People talk about the Raiders who have cash flow options for either one of them. Obviously, Carr's not going to go there. But where else is he going? The Saints have massive cash problems right now. The Titans are dwindling. I don't know if they would necessarily trade Tannehill for Carr and have to do all those roster gymnastics for that either. The Falcons are in very early stages of a rebuild. The Panthers are not as good as the Jets. So why isn't Carr coming to the Jets? What other situations are much better? He talks about stability, and I know the Jets aren't necessarily the most stable because they, both our guys might get fired, but he's not going to the Commanders in terms of stability. So who are we really fighting for him? The Bucks? Are the Bucks an option? The Bucks are in cap hell, and obviously they're a little bit past their prime. So I think I'm not saying he's the number one option necessarily, but he's top 3.
Well, Finger Lakes Jets fan says Carolina with Reich makes me nervous. Easy division to win though. So, listen, maybe Carr's saying, hey, well, I want to get to the playoffs and win some playoff games, and maybe I'll take the path of least resistance. That could be a thought process, but I don't know. I mean, one thing you always hear about people say,
why would they draft the quarterback?
Well, I don't know. So like the thing is like you say someone's an ultra competitor. Like if you're an ultra competitor, you want to play against the best. Like that's one of the reasons why you play in the NFL. Like even if you're a great college player, you want to be great in the NFL as well. So I don't know. I mean, like I don't think a player would put so much into, let me go to the division that's the path of least resistance.
To get there and then lose. Yeah. And people talk about Carr in terms of like Waller. Waller was hurt for a big part of this year. Renfrow was hurt for a big part of this year. I'm not sure if this is the exact stat, Matt, but that's something I heard that Adams, Renfrow, and Waller only played 70 snaps this year together. So it's not like he had his full array of weapons for the entire year. And before that, how many coaches were fired? How many good receivers did he have pass when he had Amari Cooper? He was traded like his years, I don't know, 2017 to 2020, he was working with pretty much nothing. He's the only stable thing in a franchise that was a shit show for the most part. You had, first-round picks getting arrested. You had a terrible offensive line. You had pretty much no running game until they got Jacobs. You had a ton of terrible receivers. Again, like Seth Roberts and a bunch of these scrubs starting. It was bad there for a while with Carr. He was still producing. So, and on top of that, you have the head coaching changes. You have the bad defense. So, yeah, this year was disappointing for Carr. We all recognize that. But does 1 year make a 9-year career? And it's not like his offensive line were studs and all these guys were healthy the whole year. So people don't factor that in. He's mid. He's terrible. It's again, what would Carr be, Kyle, to us? The best quarterback since.
He's definitely better than Ryan Fitzpatrick. Brett Favre was only 1 year. Chad Pennington, I guess you could say.
Exactly. And probably even better than
And the thing is Pennington, got hurt, right? Whereas Carr has been, he had the broken leg at the end of 2016, but he's pretty consistently been healthy. So
yeah, exactly. He's Pennington, okay.
Carr's started 99% of possible games, I think. Something like that.
Yeah, let's see. Anybody watching the Pro Bowl? I'm more prone to watch the Pro Bowl, like because there's dodgeball and there's like a throwing competition.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Watch the actual game.
But what's the point of watching football? What's the point of watching football if it's not actual football?
Yeah, but I want to watch Sauce Gardner play dodgeball. Like I'm cool.
Oh no, that's fun. That's cool.
Yeah, or like can a quarterback hit a bucket from 40 yards? Like that's kind of cool.
Yeah, but like, what's the point of playing like a football game where you can't even like blitz and stuff? I mean, it's not football. Like,
the Pro Bowl.
Yeah.
Deadline for Carr is February 15th. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's February 15th. I'm pretty sure that's the date. And again, my thing is Rodgers versus Carr. Everything being equal, it's definitely Rodgers. But I understand with Carr, it's the longevity. He's not as volatile. And if you miss out on Carr because you don't even go for him, and then Rodgers retires or goes somewhere else, and you're sitting there with nothing left, pretty much, or at least much lesser options, I'm gonna be very, very pissed because I get the Carr appeal, even though he's not as good as Rodgers. But Rodgers is swinging for the fences, and even if you land him, what's to say he doesn't retire after a year? And then you're sitting there with shit left again. So it's rough. It's very, very risky with Rodgers. What's up, MB99? Let's see.
What's up, MB?
Yeah, I'm scrolling through this pretty quickly again. Wow, what a shit offensive Jaguars had him again. So you can give him a lot of credit. Hackett for the 2017 year.
Hackett with the Bills too. Look at Hackett with those Bills offenses. Like you want to talk about? They also had those. What was it?
Kyle Morton and
2014 and 2015 Bills. They had a guy named Jeff Toole starting for them for a little bit. You want to talk about bottom of the barrel offenses? In his stints with the Jags and the Bills, they were really bad. Mm-hmm. Now I heard Drew Gear, who's been a longtime friend of mine from doing podcasting for like the past 7 years or whatever, and he was criticizing. It was like a Jeff Toole game where Jeff Toole was starting for the Bills. I think they were playing the Texans or whatever. They were on the goal line, and it was like, I don't know, 3rd and 1 or something like that. And they ran a screen pass, and JJ Watt picked it off and ran it back like 90 something yards for a touchdown. And like Gear, like kind of like highlighted that to say like, oh, Hackett can overthink himself at times. I don't know. I hear you with
It's
that.
one play, though.
Hopefully he's grown from that, but I don't know. I guess sometimes, yeah, and I
Um,
don't know. I mean, sometimes when you don't have much to work on offense, you got to kind of get creative. But yeah, anyway.
Rivka, what do you think happened in Denver? Why was it so dysfunctional? I get that Russ was uncoachable. So yeah, again, I watched those first couple of games. It's like drop, 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 drop. Russ running into a sack, Russ skipping an open receiver, 2 fumbles at the goal line where the Seahawks recovered, which obviously isn't going to bode well to the scoring points in the NFL. Russ Wilson being who he is, and I'm not completely absolving him of any criticism here. But with that being said, he's going to an OC role versus a head coach role where he has much less on his plate. Now, do I think that he should have adjusted to Russ more in terms of getting him out of the pocket and that stuff? I guess, sure, but he's also not the same Russell Wilson he was when he was 26 years old. He saw him and tried to make him more of a pocket passer, play action, pocket passer instead of rolling out guy because that's what his athleticism showed that he should do. So I don't think there's a good marriage right from the jump. Like you're taking a West Coast quick decision-making offensive coordinator for Russell Wilson, who was never necessarily that. So the marriage in general didn't make sense to start. So is there some concerns there from the Broncos? For sure. But a lot of it was on the talent, the fumbles, Russell Wilson as well. It's hard to say, okay, roll out Russell Wilson more where you can't really roll out like you did 5 years ago. So, but there's some blame. Again, I think he gets a little bit run heavy, second and long running the ball or 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4 running the ball. There's some issues I had, some of the spacing with concepts, some of the timeouts and stuff like that. But he's not going to have to do that as a head coach. So I don't know. Anything else to add there before I'm just scrolling through?
Yeah, and you might so some people might want to put all the blame on Hackett, like, oh, what a fucking dumbass. Like, you're not utilizing your player's skill set. And there's some level of criticism there to be sure. But you could also be thinking like, okay, well, this team has just invested so much in Russell Wilson. We traded 3 first-round picks and a bunch of players or whatever it was. And we gave him this huge contract, 50-something million a year. Like, so he's obviously our long-term future. And, you want to utilize a player's, you want to play them to their strengths, but at the same time, you also got to be thinking like, okay, well, Russ doesn't have the athleticism he used to have. So we got to kind of transition the way he's going to play and adjust it. So like, okay, he's not going to make as much plays outside the pocket anymore. So let's develop him into a pocket passer. And you would think a guy who has been playing 10 plus years in the league, he would be able to read defenses a little bit better and operate from the pocket better, but it just kind of didn't work out. And it's like, it's not necessarily a bad plan if it did work out. Like, players, they have to kind of I know that I saw Rivka say something about how she watched a bunch of Giants games in the past. And I think I remember her saying when she was on a different podcast, New York Jets ground crew, that I think a lot of her family members are Giants fans. Like Michael Strahan, right? His last couple of years in the league, he lost a ton of weight. Like he was playing like 270-ish pounds, for the earlier stages of his career. And he obviously had a great career. But the last couple of years, he was playing more near like the 240s, 250s. So you're talking like 20, 30 pounds lost. But, that was how he was going to, take care of his body as it got older and stuff. Like sometimes your joints get old, you can't support as much weight. Sometimes, you lose your speed as you get older, lose a little bit of weight. That's how you can kind of regain it. So like, I don't necessarily think like if that was Hackett's plan to make Russell Wilson more of a pocket passer, that also you don't want your guy to get hurt as much too, right? Like, so like he's going to take more hits if he's constantly moving outside the pocket. So I don't know. I mean, like there's a lot of criticism to be had there. Sometimes there's a variety of reasons why things don't work. So.
Are you sure, Kyle? Twitter world and YouTube world, it's just you have to put it on one thing or the other thing. There is no middle ground. There's no gray area. Eagle mentioned Jimmy Ward. I don't know if you saw that DJ Reed is trying to recruit Jimmy Ward to the Jets. And
Jimmy Ward said something like, I don't want to be playing nickel or something. And Shanahan was like, do you want to be playing the bench?
Dude, Jimmy Ward was like, I know he's 31 now, and I don't know how much he's fallen off, but he was always like a pretty solid free safety. So if you're going to take him and sign him for, I don't know, $5-6 million, I'd much rather have him than Joyner. So I would be happy with Jimmy Ward for sure. I know he hits like a truck too, so that's good.
You want to talk about soft hitting, LaMarcus Joyner. You want to talk about a guy who stops his feet upon contact. And even if he does contact you, it's like, he's going to try to bring you down with his arms, man. And he was just so bad all around.
Oh, he's terrible. You're definitely late. What's up, Jets Chaos? Can the Raiders tender Carr? They can't. If they're trying to keep him, they just keep him on his contract. But they can't tender him. So he's off of that. He's off his rookie deal. But let's see. Well said, Kyle. You got some credit for the Aaron Rodgers thing.
Oh yeah, I did see that.
Yeah, got a lot of that. I'm just trying to run through it. Joe Flacco isn't.
I couldn't help but think it's kind of safe to say what I said now, because it's almost like, people mostly understand it. But if I said that like a year and a half ago, I some people might have jumped down my throat. And I certainly kind of wanted to.
Year
but
and a half ago, I would have said, no, you're not saying that right now. Now, okay, it's fine. People
see that's the thing though. Like if you say something that's just kind of safe to say, like, you're not really like making an impact or, influencing people or changing their mind. Like, oh, wow, you just said the safe thing. Okay. That's really brave. You said the safe thing. So brave and stunning. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Anyone not sure how to handle Connor Hughes and his confidence? Jets will walk away with a QB they're happy with. I think it's kind of safe to say that, right? Because the Jets are willing to go all in, and they're.
Wait, I don't get it. Wait, Connor Hughes is very confident the Jets will get a quarterback. What is?
Yeah.
I don't know. What did Connor Hughes say? I don't get it. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know. Apparently, he's confident the Jets will walk away with a QB they're happy with. I didn't see the tweet, but
okay.
It's safe to say, that they're a good team. They have an owner who wants to win. They have a GM who's on the hot seat. They're going to make a big trade.
I'll say this about Connor. Connor's a good writer, that's for sure. And I don't know, his personality doesn't necessarily vibe with me, but he does seem to connect pretty well with a lot of the younger generation of Jets fans. But in terms of like his inside scoops, I don't really think he's that good. Like I feel like a lot of the national guys get some of the inside scoops way quicker than he does, even though he's in the building and stuff. And I feel like he's just been wrong about so many things with like, oh, according to my source, this is going to happen. I feel like he's been wrong way too often for me to like necessarily.
I think like I'm not shitting on anybody that beat, but I don't think they really break a lot of stuff. And
yeah,
it is what it is. People are talking about like, oh, Joe Douglas he's telling everybody how much he wants Rodgers. Yeah, that's a good idea. Joe Douglas would definitely do that. Like it's stupid. Anyway, Jets super fan says Mahomes, Burrow, Allen, Herbert, Rodgers. I'm completely fine with that ranking. I think that's probably fair. I think you could argue for just next year, Trevor Lawrence being above Rodgers. Obviously, if you're assuming ascension for Lawrence and descension for Rodgers. But right now, if you tell me who is going to be the better quarterback just next year, I'll bet my house on it. It's Rodgers over Lawrence.
The thing is, all those guys, AFC quarterbacks.
Exactly, I know. No Carr, Geno, or Jimmy. Rodgers are bust.
Considering Rodgers came to the Jets, sure.
I just think lumping like Carr with Jimmy and Geno's going to get signed. He's not an option, but lumping Carr with Jimmy is discrediting Carr in my opinion. But again, yeah, Rodgers are bust.
I keep trying to say that too. Like, you haven't been putting out Carr film on Twitter yet, have you?
No.
Okay. Well,
dude,
some people
I went through the first 2 or 3 games in 2021, and then I was like, if he doesn't sign, and I get myself excited for this, and I do all this work for nothing, like it's gonna really piss me off. So I was like, I'll hold off. I'll do it after something happens.
Okay. Well, okay. Forget that for a moment. Obviously, watching all 22 is better. But you could even kind of get a gist of what I'm saying just from watch some YouTube highlights. Jimmy Garoppolo versus Derek Carr. You will see way more impressive throws from Derek Carr than you will see from Jimmy Garoppolo. Like Jimmy Garoppolo
has had really good deep ball.
Like
his deep ball is really nice.
It's really good. I've been trying to say that for years. Like Jimmy Garoppolo, like a lot of like, yeah, sure. He's had some years where he's had some nice stats. I know his win-loss record is really good, but a lot of it's kind of like manufactured. Like Kyle Shanahan with his offense, he creates so much space for these players. And you got players like Deebo Samuel and Ayuk, who, when they get the ball in their hands, they can create so much after the catch.
Yeah, put Carr in the Niners and see what happens.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, if you need to make like a deep post route, threading 2 different players, like who are you confident is going to make that throw? Jimmy Garoppolo or Derek Carr? I'll take Derek Carr 10 times out of 10.
Oh, and he's more mobile too than Jimmy Garoppolo. He actually has some pretty good pocket movement and stuff like that. He doesn't run. If Rodgers goes to Tennessee, Carr goes to San Francisco, do you get Tannehill? Do we go with Tannehill? I'd rather get Dak. I think Tannehill and Jimmy are in the same region for me. I don't know what type of offensive systems Tannehill has run. Jimmy would be more comfortable with a West Coast system than Tannehill, at least from my knowledge. But if Tannehill has run it, I'm okay with him over Garoppolo. But if he hasn't run it, then Garoppolo over Tannehill. But neither. I'd rather have Dak in that case. But I'm going to keep running through this.
There is a part of me too.
Definitely.
There's a part of me, like Derek Carr has been, and I'm even guilty of this too, who has shit on people have been shitting on Derek Carr for so many years. And part of it's because they're the Raiders, and dude, like those 2000 Raiders, like after the year they went after the Super Bowl, they were a dumpster fire for so long, man. So I think that's a huge part of it. But people, like, I remember Derek Carr had like beginning of the year press conference a couple years ago, and he's like, I'm tired of being disrespected. If he came to the Jets, there would be such a huge part of me that'd be rooting for him just to shove it in all the other fan bases and all the doubters. Like, oh, you thought Carr couldn't actually win some games, if he's got some competence around him. Like, I'd be rooting for him in like a hell of a way for that reason.
I'm pretty much on board with Finger Lakes right here. You can talk me into either Carr or Rodgers, get either one. I'm fine with either. It's just, again, Kyle, I'm gonna have serious problems, and I'm gonna not be able to sleep at night if Carr signs elsewhere, and then Rodgers is still, I don't know if we're gonna play all this stuff, and then now the Bucks are in it, now the Niners are in it, now all these teams are in it, and we don't get Rodgers, and then we're sitting there with nobody. I'm gonna be furious if they don't even try to get Carr. So it's the timeline. If Carr's available first, go for him. Because you can't miss on, you can't have neither on your team next year. And with Rodgers, it's a possibility because he could retire, he can go somewhere else. Where Carr, obviously he can go somewhere else as well, but you get to strike out on him first. The problem is if you're going for Carr, you might not be able to even swing at Carr, where you can swing at Carr, miss, and you can still swing at Rodgers. But I just can't skip on Carr. So can't hold out too long. Now if he decides within the next week that he wants to play, and we're going to open it up for some handshake agreements between the Jets and the Packers, fine. But I'm not waiting until May. I'm not waiting until April. I'm not waiting until March. It's now. Like it's the next couple of weeks. It should happen for Carr.
I think Rodgers needs to understand that too. I mean, like Tom Brady just made his decision recently, so hopefully he'll do that soon. I hope.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I
don't know. I mean, if you're Aaron Rodgers, I don't see. I mean, he's obviously made a ton of money too, but I think if I was see Tom Brady, he can kind of retire saying, listen, I won a Super Bowl without Bill Belichick. Like Rodgers, it's been a long time since he's won it, man. That was 2010. That was a long time ago. Like, I feel like if I'm Aaron Rodgers, I want to prove to people, hey, listen, I am one of the best. And he could go and do what Peyton Manning did, win a Super Bowl with another team. And he's still really good. He was obviously, he had the thumb injury, but I guess overall he's been, decently healthy in the past couple of years. And his contract is huge right now too. So that is a lot of money to walk away from. I don't know. I think he's going to play. He's going to play.
You just can't wait. You can't wait for him to say, yeah, I'm playing. And then us try to trade for him in April and then he's not here and Carr's gone. If they're available at the same time, go for Rodgers hard. But I can't see not going for Carr for the hope of Rodgers. That's just silly to me.
And also, by the way, shout out to Nania and a couple other people because I saw Alex just said this. If Rodgers retires, he would be in the same Hall of Fame class as Brady. And does he want to be overshadowed by Brady in that Hall of Fame class?
He's playing. He sounds like he's playing. I haven't seen Angle in a couple of weeks, but he's coming in hot. What's up? I don't know where you've been, but what's going on? Joby, what's our QB future? To me, it's Carr or Rodgers. You can't not even swing at Rodgers or at Carr. It'd be very, very stupid to put all your eggs into the Rodgers basket. He might be the better option, but also with that be plan B because it's the timeline. It's a timeline. Supposedly pull up the list of Super Bowl winning QBs. It's Rodgers, but what if who's to say Rodgers gets past Allen or Burrow, all these guys, and how long is that window? 1 or 2 years with Rodgers? And listen, like if some stuff goes different ways, listen, Jimmy could have won that Super Bowl against what was it? Was it the
Chiefs?
The Pats? Chiefs. Yeah, that he could have won that game. Sanchez could have beat the Steelers to get to the Super Bowl. It's not impossible. But to say Carr is a scrub and we don't want him, and all of our eggs are in Rodgers' basket. And again, we're talking about Rodgers at 6th and Carr at 11, 12. I don't think it's it's a drop off, but I think people view Carr as like what Fitzpatrick was in 2015 for us or something like that. Like Carr is above that level. He's better than anything we've had in 2 decades. So I'll be okay with it. It's a timeline thing for me. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah, you can't really compare Carr to Fitzpatrick. I mean, just talent level alone. I know people are, but I'm just saying that's kind of dumb to do that.
I've heard some rumors that people aren't willing to take that Cardinals job because they're not willing to deal with Kyler Murray and who he is as a quarterback, and he seems like the ultimate douchebag quarterback. So for some of the
he seems immature. People keep playing that clip on Twitter of DeAndre Hopkins like, what you looking at,
This Matt Wallace, which I get this take. I think they're both in that 11 to 13, 14 range. Dak over Carr. I'm okay with saying that, or I'm okay with your opinion on that. But I've been more impressed with what Carr has done with less in his 9 years than what Dak has had. Because Dak was very successful, and he's been good, but like
he's got good offensive talent around him, especially on the offensive line.
His offensive line was top 3, top 2, top 1 for years. He had Zeke in his prime, who was amazing. He has Pollard, who's probably one of the, if not one, probably one of the best backup running backs in the league.
They've always had a really solid number 1 receiver
Cooper.
there.
Yeah, like he's had a lot more than Carr, and I still think they're in the same level. I think if you put Carr on what Dallas was in their heyday, I think Carr is better than Dak in my opinion. From what I
Des Bryant when his first Dak's first year or two was like 16 touchdowns a year type of guy. Like that was, if I'm not mistaken, was that Tony Romo's year? I can't remember the whole Des catch in Green Bay in Lambeau. Who was the quarterback of the Cowboys that year? Was that Dak or was that
For what year? Sorry, I was looking at your chat.
Remember the Dez catch? Did he catch it or not in Lambeau in the playoff game?
Was that Romo?
I'm asking. I think it might have been Dak. To be honest, I could be wrong about that.
That was 20. That was 2013.
But my point is, Dak's rookie year was 2016, and at that point, Des Bryant.
That's the year that the Packers win the Super Bowl that year. That was 2013, right?
No. That was later than 2013. And the Packers won the Super Bowl in 2010. Yeah, I'm sure about that. Someone in the Des catch thing was Romo.
2015.
Okay. Yeah, so Dak's rookie year was 2016, but what I'm saying is Des was still a good number 1 receiver, like legit number 1 receiver at that point.
Oh, fuck yeah. Yeah, he was good. He fell off quick. Let's see. Carr's damage. He took this, and I'm not going to go into it now because I have to get off soon because I have to go to work. But like Carr's damage, he took the Raiders nowhere. It's that is one of the dumbest comments I've ever seen in my life. Like it just that falls in line with the Stafford stuff. Stafford took the Lions nowhere. He went to a good franchise. The next year, won a Super Bowl. It's about the offensive line, the receivers, the tight ends, the defense, the head coach. It's not just. Why don't we just play, freaking parking lot football where it's one quarterback, 1 receiver or something like that? If we're just talking about nobody else but the quarterbacks now.
By the way,
it's so dumb. There's such a dysfunctional fucking franchise.
When we were running through those lists of quarterbacks, like, is this quarterback better than this guy? I don't think Stafford ever came up in those discussions. Right? Like, was he one of those names you mentioned?
Oh, no.
Yeah. So, like, would you say that Stafford? I mean, obviously he had the injury last year, but would you say Stafford's better than Carr?
But nonetheless, Stafford was a bad quarterback. The Rams were completely wrong for trading for him, right, Kyle? It didn't work out. Oh, shit. They won a Super Bowl. Oh, shit. I forgot. Oh, wow. Weird. It's weird how you go to a different team, you actually might be able to win. The Raiders, his entire time there, have been a model of consistency, Kyle. Great receivers, great offensive line, great defenses. Their defense has never been below top 10 since he's been there. Did you know that? They've always been a top 10 defense. They've always been a top 10 offensive line, and they've always had, Amari Cooper's and not Seth Roberts starting. Like that's just dumb. It's such a dumb comment. I'm sorry. It's just so stupid.
And by the way, I think one of the things that Derek Carr, like, I don't think Derek Carr is necessarily like he's solid in getting the ball out quick, but he's not one of these guys who's like very good at evading pressure. That's probably one of his characteristics that, like little something like Tom Brady, like really subtly sliding in the pocket, just creating an extra little room. I don't think Carr's necessarily great in that area. But when they had a monster offensive line back in like 2016, 2017, when you're thinking like Hudson, Kelechi Osemele, Donald Penn, even though he was good
Kelechi
at the end of his
Osemele's
career.
fall off was crazy, bro.
It was crazy, right? But
That's crazy.
when Carr had that offensive line too, those Raiders won a hell of a lot of games. And Carr was like that 2016 year, if I'm not mistaken, he was at least in the MVP discussion.
Exactly.
Right. And they gave him a monster contract after that year.
He's not good. Dude, he's not good. QB wins. No wins in the playoffs. He's not good, Kyle. I don't care what your argument is. We have to run through this pretty quickly. Kyle, we're doing lightning rounds, so like a sentence to each of these. What do you pay Quan? What are your feelings on Quan if you're going to pay him?
I guess I give him like $4 million or something.
I was going to say 3 or 4 million. 3 or 4 million for him for a year or two. I'm cool with it. Rivka says 5.3, specifically 5.3 for 2 or 3 years for Quincy. I'm okay with 5.3. I am. Anything 6, like get in the 6-7 range, it's too much for Quincy versus what you can get on a linebacker market, which seems very cheap the last couple of years. So I don't want to just pay him to pay him. You think Mahomes would destroy? Mahomes destroys pretty much everybody. You can't compare anybody to Mahomes. We're not getting guys. Unfortunately, we're not getting Burrow or Herbert or Josh Allen. Like we don't just have those guys. Rodgers is going to be good for what, another year or two. Like to say that Carr can't beat those guys. He beat Herbert in a regular season game. And Burrow just put up 20 points for him. It's 20 points versus the Chiefs defense. The Chiefs defense isn't anything to write home about. It's an okay defense. So we can never beat the Chiefs. The Chiefs are unbeatable. Like, yeah, obviously, Mahomes, makes it probably lesser than likely.
Listen, Mahomes is absolutely amazing. And what he did this year, like, he should definitely win MVP. Losing Tyreek Hill. I mean, like, I've been saying how much of a fan I am of Tyreek Hill his game personally. Like, I was so, Joe, I was so upset when we missed out on him with that almost trade. He's one of those almost Jets. But yeah, Tyreek had a monster year. Part of the reason why Tua looked pretty competent this year. No doubt that if Tua did not have those two weapons, Waddle and Tyreek, his stats would have looked very pedestrian this year, in my opinion.
Kyle,
but Mahomes should be MVP this year. Like, the fact that they lost Tyreek and he still was like had a monster year just shows how good he is. But also at the same time, I mean, like, one of the reasons why Mahomes developed, and like, listen, his first year as a starter, he's tossing 50 touchdowns in a year. Like, that's insane. And part of that's because Mahomes is so great, but he also had, like, you're talking like a Hall of Fame tight end, Travis Kelce. He had Kareem Hunt, I believe, his first year, who was like an absolute stud at running back. And, Tyreek Hill, who's, I think Eagle kind of like quibbled with me a little bit last year when I said I think that Tyreek's going to be a Hall of Fame wide receiver. And maybe I was crowning him a little bit too early as well, but now he's done it with like 2 teams. I don't even remember what the hell my point was, but like, I'm just trying to say, like, talent also makes quarterbacks too. Like, Mahomes is amazing, but let's not lose sight of the fact that he had really good offensive lines his first couple of years in Kansas City. Andy Reid's one of the best offensive minds in NFL history. And he had
Kelce, who's probably the best receiving tight end ever.
Yeah, 2 Hall of Fame type pass catchers. So
and like this comment, Carr can't carry a team on his back. Who can right now? Mahomes? And Mahomes still has Kelce, still has Andy Reid. So what quarterback is – no, there's not really any quarterback who can carry a team on their back. Josh Allen's got eliminated after scoring, 10 points in the playoffs. Joe Burrow has T. Higgins and obviously Jamar Chase, a solid defense. So no quarterback is really carrying teams on their back anymore. Like, Mahomes, you can say that for Mahomes, but again, he has Andy Reid and Travis Kelce. Like, and even if you're going to give it to him and Burrow and Allen, who's to say that Rodgers at 39 years old is carrying a team on his back? He didn't last year at the Packers. I know he had bad receivers and a broken thumb or whatever it was, but we're putting all of our eggs in the basket that Rodgers could be as good as Mahomes or Burrow next year, or even Allen. I don't know. Allen didn't carry his team on his back in the playoff game, so unless you're saying that Rodgers is as good as Mahomes, then neither can Rodgers. So I don't know, man. It's crazy. We're getting to Looney Tune line here. Hit the like, appreciate it. Hackett's experience over Mike LaFleur. Cool with that. Yeah, I'm just trying to run. I'm about a half an hour behind, but 8:30 was my absolute cutoff point. So I gotta let's see. I take John Morton over Mike LaFleur. No, dude, Nicholas, we were 1,000%
what
with
John
this.
Morton did in 2017, man.
Yeah.
That
He
team,
should have been offense coordinator for the next couple of years. I don't get why he was fired. He's the best OC. He's the and again, it was 1 year, so it's a very small sample size. He's the best OC I've seen as a legitimate, like, die-hard Jets fan. With what he did in 2017, I love John Morton.
yeah, that was
Fired because of
what the hell did he do to get fired? Is who I guess we'll never find that out.
We never will. But no, he was great. He's put up like multiple like 30+ point games, at least like 2 or 3 of them with nothing. And Josh McCown is your quarterback. He was solid.
Yeah. Josh McCown with a shit offensive line with no running backs worth mentioning. I mean, yeah, sure. Bilal Powell was fine.
Can you look up can you look up our offensive roster in 2017? I'm just curious. I'm curious.
So I still got the 2017 Jags tab open. Let's see. 2017 Jets roster. You could go through some of the chat while I pull that up.
I'll go ahead and take Carr. I think he's a good QB, better than anything we've had. Does he want to come as a question? Yeah, no, that's
by the way, that Jets team was 5. That Jets team was 5-7 prior to McCown getting hurt.
For Carr, I think he's getting unfairly labeled as like a soft quarterback because he cried one time and he's religious. I think he can handle the New York market. I think it's getting a little bit overblown.
Tom Brady cried in that documentary about him. Remember that documentary, the Brady 6 or whatever, where they highlighted the 6 quarterbacks that were drafted before Tom Brady? Tom Brady's crying like a baby in that video. Is he a bitch? Come on.
I still want a young QB to build around. Of course, Nick, like we all want that top 10, top 5 quarterback, the Herberts, the Burrows of the world. But unfortunately, it's not going to happen for the Jets right now. We've swung and struck out quite a few times with the young quarterbacks at this point. So.
Jermaine Kearse had 810 receiving yards that year.
Dude, this is a brutal offense. Shell was garbage. Winters is garbage. Wesley Johnson's one of the worst runners I've ever seen. James Carpenter was way overrated by fans. Kelvin Beachum was mid at best. Tomlinson's garbage. Swearing Jenkins at best is okay. Jermaine Kearse, garbage. Robbie Anderson, okay, a 3 or a 4. Bilal Powell, love him, but come on. Like, ever put up 30 points in the games? Like, yeah, I love it. I love it. Morton, man, bring him back. What is he doing now?
I'm trying to look at some of the depth guys too. Tavares Cadet,
Morris Claiborne, Chandler Catanzaro. Let's see who was on our defense that year.
Oh wait, we had
Chad Hansen.
Don't forget about Matt Forte. Yeah, that was Matt Forte's last year, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
Ben Aijolana.
Jeremy Curley. Joe Kyle, I like Curley. He's a good Jet. Joe Kyle, how likely is it that we bring in Jimmy Ward, and do you like him?
Honestly,
I think it's relatively.
I can't say enough, truthfully.
Like you always take the field in those situations, but I like him as a safety, and it seems like he's not going to be back with the 49ers. He has a familiarity with Salah, so bring him in. I don't think they spend big on a guy like Poyer when you have all the needs they do on offense and linebacker, safety, defensive tackle, etc. So I think Poyer would cost you a pretty penny. I think the Jets are going to more spend $4, $5, $6 million in a few positions on defense and then try to round up the offense really. So Dak is Carr with a top 5 defense. I'm not sure exactly what that means.
I think he's just saying that like Dak is very similar to Carr in terms of ability and like how good they are, but Dak has a top 5 defense that Carr doesn't have. Hence why Dak made it to the second round of the playoffs.
He's had much better talent around him. I think you put Carr there, he produces better, but that's just my personal thing. But again, they're in that same range. So you put Dak over Carr. It's not something I'm going to necessarily argue, but I have a different feeling. Let's see. Rodgers not going to retire now. I don't think Rodgers going to retire in general, but I got about 13. Carr not a winner. Knicks suck. Knicks always suck. I'm sorry. I hate Knicks fans almost more than I hate any other fan base. I know that a lot of them are Jets fans, but Knicks fans are so goddamn cocky for no reason. They've won one playoff series in the last 20 years, and they talk like they're actually good. Well, they beat the Pacers or the Celtics like in 2013 or 15, whatever it was. But they're all about MSG. Nets don't matter. Okay, cool. Like you play in a cool stadium in New York, bro. Awesome. So yes, I'm a Nets fan who hates Knicks fans. I'm sorry. I don't like isolating some people, but suck. Carr is very safe pickup. I won't be mad. I'm just flying through Kyle. Any last words before I find anything else in here?
No, I think we really talked a lot today, and we're just kind of in wait and see mode at this point.
Mm-hmm. I will be back. Who's your ideal free agent target? I don't know, Cronin. Honestly, I haven't really looked into it. I would like a guy like Jimmy Ward. Honestly, talking about $5-6 million most likely a year. A guy who's familiar with solid defense. A guy who's not going to cost you too much. And realistically, would I like Jeremy Bates? Sure, but he's also going to cost you $14 million a year. The Jets don't have to spend on that. So realistically, it's more like Jimmy Ward type guys.
Jesse Bates.
I said Jeremy Bates.
Yeah.
Okay. So appreciate you guys. I'll be back next week. I don't know if it's Wednesday or Thursday. Most likely Thursday, solo without Kyle. Kyle will be back next week. Hopefully something breaks within the next week or two. We will be back to discuss any of the news that happens, like Von Bell. The only problem with Von Bell is he's a strong safety, and so is Whitehead. Did they cut Whitehead? But nonetheless, I'll be back next week. Kyle, last words.
I would take Von Bell at like a $2 million contract versus Whitehead at $7.5 million.
Von Bell's going to get more than that.
Yeah, I know
quite a bit. Yeah.
Okay.
Older,
yeah.
So,
I mean, listen. Let's go Chiefs Super Bowl. Yeah, I'd like to see my dad's team win another one.
You won't be back for the Super Bowl. What are you doing for the Super Bowl, Kyle?
I was getting excited. I was texting you that hey, if the Bills pulled it off against the Bengals, I was going to go to the AFC Championship game, but it wasn't meant to be. What am I doing for the Super Bowl? I suppose I'm going to be watching it somewhere with my father. I don't know who's hosting yet.
Nice,
dude. I'll tell you quick little story. So my dad, lifelong Chiefs fan. He's liked them since Len Dawson, Hank Stram, all that kind of stuff. So my dad saw the Chiefs in Super Bowl IV, saw them win it. But then they didn't go to another, similar to the Jets, 50-something years without even seeing his team in a Super Bowl. And then 2019 season, they're playing against the Niners. They get down by, 14 or whatever. And my dad, he's so despondent. He's saying, Andy Reid can't win the big one. Andy Reid can't win the big one. You got to fire his ass. Hire Josh McDaniels. I swear to God, this is what my dad's saying. I was like, Dad, you guys got fucking Patrick Mahomes. I was like, you guys can come back and win this game. And sure enough, they did. But he was calling for Andy Reid to be fired during that game and to hire Josh McDaniels.
Jesus, can you imagine how bad of a move that would have been? With that being said, Kyle will be back after the Super Bowl. We'll discuss that a little bit. And again, Jets news, I'll be back next week to talk to you guys. But thank you for Super Chats. Thank you for the likes.